41. Overqualified teacher. It has been slightly more than a month's worth of time since Liam spoke to the Tsakurems of the Tipani and Omadikeya clans. He might have overreacted due to his inclination for paranoia in rapport to the meeting and the amount of lethal force put into the preparation. It ended with each cordially saying their goodbye, and he assumed they traveled back to their respective clans. No deal was done with them. Not for the fault of not asking, but Neytiri denied it, saying it was pointless, that her clan didn't need to learn more from his likes. If his appearance as a human displeased her this much, then that was her problem. She was foolish. Even if he knew, she instantly had second thoughts on her words, but she was too proud to come back over them and excuse herself. But her words are mostly her own biased opinion of him from his appearance and her past experience with humans. So he didn't truly care. Primitive arrows, even if equal to ballista bolts, won't be enough against helicopters. He can only hope she realizes this fast. And the same for the rest of her clan, and Jake as well. He needed the Nausicaa to become truly united. For Hakuto, it wasn't a full-on refusal, but more along the line of needing the accord of his Tsahik and Oloikton, which in his clan were one and the same to proceed further. He showed great interest in the prosthetic. As for the Olangi, all went smoothly, extremely so in fact, and as of now, they should stay in his general location for as long as the rainy season still lives on and the newborns need to commune with the Tree of Divergence. A very important and dangerous aspect of their culture that needs great preparation, and one that even affects where and when mothers should give birth, which is also affected by simple deduction when the act of procreation must happen. Even if he knew they were good at using various methods of contraception. All in all, it didn't really help him because he doesn't have any method of knowing how long the rainy season will last, and that the Gnostics were exceptionally bad at telling the time to others considering they can't count past 16. He assumed it was some sort of biological clock or how they spoke and listened to Iowa. So he asked Max. He got his answer a few hours later, and from what Max said, it should last till mid-September. He was now not only busy doing what he usually does, but also being in almost daily contact with the Gnostics. The deal of knowledge for knowledge not directly being the only reason. As to put mildly, he was a novelty, curiosity, and an object of something akin to adoration for a no small amount of the Olangi, mostly the younger side, but not uniquely. Sometimes surprisingly to the point of lust, in big part from female teenagers, he remarked, but not only. He wasn't interested in kids, and sadly that wasn't much different for the adults. There were more pressing matters than useless romance and drama for satisfying something as animalistic as lust, a good aspect of his body or newly gained experience, or that were not humans. In all cases, he felt exponentially less craving of the flesh than he did before. Not that he ever was that depraved to begin with, but it kept things effective and to the point. Though he could roughly understand the origin of such attraction, he was exotic, so to say, and important by their standard, while an anomaly, he was far from even remotely being considered ugly. And not forgetting his actions and connection, all of this affected how the Gnostics of the Olangi clan perceive. That didn't equate to every Gnostics liking him. Far from it, such as the family related to the hunter who tried to kill him. But from what he gathered, it was quite mid, as they themselves condemned the hunter's action. And there were a few others. But at the end of the day, the leaders and nearly every member of the clans possessed a positive image of him that he could guess was in grand parties thanks to Askway, Marali, and the teenage couple aka Tuti and Maruk. He wondered when they would assume it because the two seemed pretty dense and more than just best friends. Liam knew of all this because he came several times per week to the Olangi settlement, situated not far from the entrance of the Sacred Hallows. It was for teaching and learning. It was an experience, to say the least. And he was currently walking within the edge of their camp, Oxidant and Septin on each of his titanium shoulder pads. Unnoticeable grips were specifically added for that purpose. His war scythe placed diagonally behind his shoulder and above a bag. His inventory didn't need to be known. Even now, that Sahik didn't mention it, so even if foolish, he refused to risk his most important asset being discovered this way. That Sahik and Oloikton might be capable of keeping it a secret, but he doubted others, even without malicious intention, will be capable of keeping their lips sealed with something like this. Something magical, even probably divine to them. Gnostics, males, and females were working in tandem, some sharpening stone arrowheads, some weaving plant fibers into baskets, some taking care of the dire horses, and kids that were too young to help were running around playing something akin to catch. It was normal, lively yet alien, and a bit out of time from his perception due to Nasik's being for all intent and purpose at the Neolithic stage. The similarities between them and humans were flagrant, but it made the many differences that much more obvious. Not that it needed all of what was mentioned to be remarked. They weren't humans, but they still were people, with the good and bad that came with it. All of them stopped what they were doing as he began to be noticed. His smile grew slightly as he waved while his two tetrapteron glared with a kind of subtlety at anything and everything. Though unlike Gladius, they weren't the most intimidating, so the effects were insignificant. One of the young kids, a boy 2 heads shorter than him, his name was Ahaniu, ran up to him a flat piece of dry wood with black lines scribbled on it. This almost earned Oxiden jumping onto the kid's head, glassy claws wide, open ready to thread the boy's eyeball out. But he stopped it before it even happened. "Teacher, I did it! Look, look!" said Kid exclaimed, waving the dry wood in the air for Liam to take, which he did with a simple movement of his hand, one faster than the kid could perceive. The writing was barely comprehensible, but he could guess the gist of it, and it was the response to the basic multiplication table from 1 to 10 and line of numbers going to 200 he asked to do last time. It was written with a charcoal pen he gave the knowledge of. He didn't make it for them. They were apt enough with this information to do it themselves. He had become a teacher of sorts, and the title of teacher had sometimes metal added in front of it thanks to his specimen implant and how he wore metal as armor. In Nasik's, it was Fnapkaryu, but that was of no importance here. He rapidly went over every result, and he nodded, pleased. This was easy, incredibly easy, and that would still be an over-exaggeration of how easy it was. But the Nasiks needed to learn from scratch at a level even lower than kindergarten, such as how foreign the concept was to them, and this in approximately 2 hours of class per week fully focused on that. It was more than explaining addition, subtraction, and multiplication. They needed to learn how to count and truly understand it, not just parrot what he says. It was math. Not understanding was going to be obvious and a big problem, and he did an order of magnitude more complicated for the older ones. But he was starting to explain their division. He was someone capable of doing calculus that perfectly explained how to create a stable and safe method of teleportation between several points in the space-time continuum, and he was teaching third-grade mathematics to primitive tall blue cat people. It was ridiculous, ludicrous. It looked and sounded like an insane joke, but it was his life. This was the result of his actions and choices. Anyway, one of his best in that age group, adult and teenager, was Maruk, both surprising and unsurprising. The teen held such a high opinion of him, it might even be considered unhealthy by some. Overall, he found teaching a relaxing and pleasant experience, but that was mostly on how eager his students were and that they held great respect for him. And that he promoted competition, the healthy kind, at least he hoped it was. He did this by giving recompense to the ones giving correct answers multiple times, and speed being an important factor as well. He gave recompense only to the lower end of the age spectrum. It was snacks like candies, smoked meats, vegetables, and fruit. For the really young, he gave toys. There needed to be a motivation, and he preferred to use the carrot than the stick. It was possible to do this because his classes were relatively small, never going past 30 individuals, and he only had 2 of which one half didn't need this treatment. The adults were the ones that gave him things, such as a type of alcohol. However, Nasiks didn't have problems eating things more than what he was used to traditionally eating, such as living purple larvas. Nothing he wouldn't have been able to guess. It didn't even taste bad. A mix between sweet and earthy with a crunchy outside and soft meaty inside. Though he never was a fan of food being able to move or fight back in your mouth. One of his rules, however, was always to give it a bite before judging its potential taste from appearance or prior ideas. Tastes were the most important aspect of foods, even if aspects and presentation were important too. They just came second and always will come second to him. It was a cultural exchange, both learning from one another. These are correct. Good job, and as promised. Liam trailed off, his left hand going into his backpack where he took from his inventory a beige, articulated figurine, to be customized. Made of a natural polymer, he turned into biodegradable plastic. It was of a long-since-gone animal from Earth. He 3D printed it with his fabricator, basing himself on models he has from techgrams of various artificial creatures in his mind, which was most of the vertebrates from the games. Not the most exact, far from it in fact, but he wasn't a paleontologist, so it mattered little, so he couldn't fix them to be right, and neither did he care. The flesh and blood creatures from the game were the result of GMOs pushed to the extreme without regulation. It was a given they weren't going to be accurate or be regular animals at all. Wow, thank you. But what animal is that? Ehania grabbed and marveled at the 60-centimeter, 23.6 and tall four-legged figurine. It had two pairs of thick legs, a long tail, and a long neck ending in a comparatively small head. It was such an alien creature. It's called a brontosaurus, one of the largest land-dwelling creatures to have ever lived. Specifically, it's a Brontosaurus lazarus. It feeds exclusively on plants, Liam explained to the Gnostics who was already playing with it. It's big compared to IMIP's one, the kid noted. It was intended to be this way. They were scaled down, but compared to others were rightly proportioned. And even if the Brontosaurus was of right proportion, it would still have been one, if not the biggest and certainly the heaviest land-dwelling creatures of Pandora. One of those big Stegosaurus-like creatures in the Great Plain, while clearly bigger and bulkier than an elephant, were lighter by a bit more than a third, and it wasn't only the moon's lower gravity at play. It was funny in a way, but again lighter didn't mean weaker, and nearly all veritable have carbon fiber bones. And this figurine was made with the measurement unit he got from the smartwatches of the scientists. By doing a simple light trick and use of the screen, he got it to the millimeter, and everything after is divided by 10. It was just a quality of life, the one that could minimize the risk of future problems and accidents. As history proved, using two distinct measuring systems in a high-precision project was a very bad and stupid idea. After this, Liam moved through the crowd, giving snacks as he did so until he was face to face with hunters, from teenagers and adults to olds. Both male and female, none was set aside. All were currently in the middle of training with bows, daggers, and polearms that consisted of spears and battle staff. He gazed at a spar between two teenagers in the distance. He supposed they were around Maruk's age, going at one another with blunt spears. One had a scar above his right eye, and the other was slightly bulkier. It was fascinating, even though he didn't understand all of the reasons behind most of their movements and actions. Though they were quite slow, the two kept eye contact with one another. Their ears were flattened and tails swishing back and forth when suddenly the one with the scar moved his left foot to the side, gaining space before he pushed most of his weight forward on his right and trusted the blunt tip of his spear toward the other throat with a yell hiss. He missed, or more like the bulkier one sidestepped, causing the attacker's eyes to widen in shock as he flailed, lose his footing in the muddy ground, and fell forward face first into the mud. 3 long seconds went by before the second took the hand of the first and yanked him up. "That was both risky and cheap of you, brother," the bulkier one said, and the other grumbled before spitting globs of mud. He just swallowed, causing the other to chuckle. Liam commanded both of his birds to fly up. As he turned around, hearing footsteps, already knowing who it was, he looked up and was met with the Acqui, a long and intricate spear in his right hand. "I see you," the Oloicton greeted, his eyes moving toward the human's war scythe. "Has the lost child come to observe how my people train? Or perhaps participate?" "Greeting, and yes, Acqui. It will be enriching. I'm a craftsman in fields not even the RDA could comprehend, but not a warrior. I won the same way an adult could beat a young child in a fistfight, no matter how skilled the child or unskilled the adult may be. And after I have important matters to discuss," Liam said as he placed his bag on a dry rock, his upper armor unclasping itself like the shed exoskeleton of an arthropod, showing his physique as he was now in only a pair of shorts. "Then let's begin, and I think you would make a good training partner," the chief agreed, and that was true for the winning part. The lost child was fast, incredibly so, and just as if not even stronger, but his movements were that of someone untrained, but skill alone could not cross every gap. Strength, speed, intelligence, luck, equipment, number, experience, agility, and so many more factors were just as crucial in deciding how a fight will end. It was an art. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 42. Liam versus Acqui. The entire training area quieted down as the Oloicton and the lost child advanced toward a patch of short grass, one with a spear and the other a war scythe. Someone having overhead the first part of the two discussions told others about this, and more Gnostics came to watch. Their chief was their best warrior and hunter, in both skill, knowledge, and experience. It was the bare minimum requirement to even hold and keep such a position, one he held for the equivalent of 50 Earth years. And he was one, if not the best, within the Great Plain at this art and way of life. Saying he wouldn't be one of the best of Iowa's children of the current time wouldn't be an exaggeration. May I know what is the origin behind the scar on your back and chest? The chief asked. It was the first time he saw them, and he knew it was from a kind of injuries you don't simply shrug off, the smaller one, the chest particularly. Gladius, parent for my back, but it got what it deserved in return. As for my chest, a surprise encounter with a Laneka, slinger, pierced right through my armor into my lung. He let out offhandedly, patting the metallic claw at the end of his weapon. Aquay nodded, his curiosity on that aspect satisfied. He spoke again as he carefully placed his weapon to take a training spear, a blunt stick. The spar will be with only a training spear, and I wonder, what type of weapon is this you wield? It's a war scythe. Thought I made it this way because I couldn't change the claw shape without altering its nature or structural integrity. Liam explained briefly as he did the same thing as the Gnostics, placing his weapon to pick one of the wood spears and breaking a third of it off for it to better suit his size. Wielding a 3-meter, 9 feet 4 long spear wouldn't do even if he was 1.97 meters tall, 6 feet 5 from what he measured. It would be impractical. The chief lifted his non-existent eyebrow at the sight, but didn't say anything. It made sense, and it was just a stick. Liam walked weapon in hand in front of Aquay, the size difference evident, and the reach of the weapon just as well. In normal conditions, the chief wouldn't even have entertained the thought of fighting with such drastically advantageous conditions compared to his opponent. But the lost child was far from the norm. The Gnostic's eyes focused on his opponent, and the human was relaxed while for him his body tensed up in anticipation. His earlier smile vanished to be replaced with a visage of seriousness. How do we proc dash? Liam didn't have the chance to finish as the chief already was on the attack. Arms flexing and legs in positions, he moved with superhuman speed, strength, and several decades of experience. The blunt tip of the weapon aimed right at Liam's chest. The said man's silver-gray eyes widened at the suddenness of it all. He saw the training spear move, but he didn't move, nor did he attempt to dodge. Instead, he reacted on instinct, not knowing what to do in this instant due to sheer befuddlement. Letting go of his weapon, Liam grabbed the incoming spear with his bare hand, stopping it dead in its tracks. Then his grip strength splintered the wood to the point the spear broke in half, but the blunt spearhead was already around the general area where his heart was. The chief's eyes widened slightly at this. Liam didn't move a millimeter while he put most of his force behind this move, and to boot it felt like he tried to stab a boulder or a large tree, unmoving, solid, and here for far longer than he ever was and ever will be. He shook his arm, still feeling the shock going through his very bones. He was more hurt than Liam. It was terrifying, fascinating, and exhilarating. And how fast the lost child had reacted and stopped such a sudden attack from such a close distance. Incredible was all he could think. Dishonorable what he has done, maybe, but in a fight to the death, honor is worthless. Kindness to an enemy for something as infantile as pride is to bring harm to yourself and what you hold dear. He learned this the hard way. The being in front of him was a force of nature, but a grossly untrained one. Though if it was a fight to the death, he was certain he held an abysmal chance of winning, and even less of winning unscattered. Liam, from what he knew and was told, would go further and beyond to secure victory, and unknown to him to an obsessive degree. No one knew what he could use to achieve it. Surely by the use of artifacts only he and the All-Mother could comprehend all his other qualities. That could have seriously injured me, or killed me if there was a bladed end, but in normal circumstances, my armor will be on me. But still, I made the right choice. I don't need to be the most skilled, but the one that survives and thrives. Liam thought he wasn't angry at Aquay for doing what he did. The opposite, in fact. He asked for this. Power without control or knowledge of how to use it didn't affect how dangerous it is, but control affects what and who this danger is directed to, and for what purpose and intent it is. He never was a fighter, at least not this way. If Aquay was equal physically to him, and without the use of tricks, the Gnostics would quite literally wipe the floor with him. Right now he could have run straight at the Gnostics and punched a hole through his chest without the latter being able to react. He knew how strong his punch was. It did cost, destroyed trees and various destroyed or cracked stones from the lower to mid-range of the hardness scale with pure brute strength. No fancy technique usable in only controlled conditions is needed. He didn't harm himself for all of this, though. He wasn't a masochist, and he took plenty of precautions, which means if he didn't care about the potential harm to himself, he could do even more damage. He was a monster. The corded muscles carved all over his body weren't only there to be pretty to look at like the ones of a bodybuilder. That was a bonus. Everything now was a first experience, and what an experience it was to be taught by a respected leader of an ancient migratory clan. He didn't like or enjoy fighting, but learning how to was a must, and fighting didn't only entail how to punch and stab with a pointy stick. It was an incredible honor that much he realized one he earned, and ironically the chief thought the same about being able to teach the lost child in that manner. The anomaly and center of attention of their all-seeing and ever-present goddess, savior of his child, and crafter of wonder. May you forgive me for what I have done, as dishonorable as it was, but this was a must. I must understand you. Now attack me with the weapon you dropped in any way you see fit, the Oloikton said with a smirk growing as he took a new spear, heart pumping more blood in his vein due to the trepidation. Are you sure? Liam asked for confirmation. It was more rhetorical than anything as the Gnostics knew better, and as he said, learning of various problems to be rectified on his non-existent technique. He was going to restrain himself. He didn't want anyone to be stupidly injured. Even a long stick can become a deadly weapon. Akwi made a barely noticeable nodding gesture, and so with a shake of his head, Liam picked his weapon up. At this point, most of the clan was here, words of what was happening having been passed from one Gnostics to another, but never altered. Maruk with Tuti close behind him arrived. Waving between the small sea of blue bodies, they stopped after climbing a large stone that gave them an optimum line of sight for what was going to happen and close enough to hear. Who do you think will win? Tuti asked to take a more comfortable seat, using Maruk's shoulder as a chin rest, to both his great joy and annoyance. It isn't a fight. He expertly dodged the question. One was his father, and the other his savior and benefactor. He would prefer none would fight, but saying he wasn't excited about what was to come would be a lie. I feel like a circus animal, Liam noted. Having so many eyes over him wasn't new, but this feeling of being seen as a strange creature never vanished. It wasn't that the Gnostics here were malicious, just curious and unused to him being here. At most, he was a few hours per week in their settlement. He was a strange creature for them. Garnering a great amount of attention for the smallest of details and actions was a given. Taking a deep breath, he closed his and opened his eyes, focusing on the Olangi chief. Muscles tensing up, he went on the attack. It was fast, spear thrusting toward the Gnostic's chest, yet it didn't hit as the Lost Child training weapon was deviated toward the ground with a simple flick of his weapon and use of his range advantage. This was but the start as Liam gained the control back and wiped his weapon as if it were a baseball bat to only end up missing again, the Gnostics having crouched down. Liam's eyes narrowed at that. That wasn't that he attacked too slow, but that he was predictable. His attacks were telegraphed. How do I fix this? He wondered, face hard and focused, cold ethereal gray, eyes never leaving their target. Thrusting his spear's blunt wooden head again and again and again, each time aiming for specific, belly, chest, shoulder, calf. They entered a rhythm. It was as if Akwi almost danced, predicting each of his moves before he even started. A dance that no humans and nearly no Gnostics could follow, to such was how fast and unpredictable it was. The crowd all around was mesmerized by it. One kept on dodging and diverting hits due to sheer experience of more than half a century, body control, and deduction skill, while the other attacked on repeat, never stopping or pausing once. He followed the first as if the principle of exhaustion was but a suggestion, each of his attacks getting faster, more precise, and more chaotic, yet coordinated with one another, telegraphed and yet unpredictable. This incessant and ever-improving reign of attack was what shocked many, Akwi being first as he could directly feel it. The Lost Child was already adapting, improving, and learning, recognizing each of his movements and their patterns. The Oloikton was relieved none of it was serious. It was almost scary to see such a quick changement. Not even 2 minutes had passed, almost as if Liam was relearning. The difference in stature and weapon reach had many effects here, and not helping in the matter of Liam hitting. He could attack with more strength or throw his weapon, but at that point sparring is pointless. He could win the fight, but that wasn't the point here. The point is learning. Though he still will. And the Oloikton was putting his entire focus toward dodging or redirecting blows whenever possible with an ease he found excessively frustrating. This continued for 2 impossibly long minutes. Liam used both hands equally, changing movement and targets, but none hit, and this caused a slight annoyance to rise within him, but it came with respect and a sort of admiration toward the Gnostics more than impressive body control and coordination. There was so much to learn. Each of the Gnostics' movements was perfect, calculated even. They balanced speed, flexibility, agility, and even grace to all in human degrees boosted with an experience only age could give. It was uncanny, but again, he wasn't too far in those inhuman aspects either. Liam suddenly stopped attacking, breaking the rhythm and confusing everyone. He then sidestepped, slightly crouched in a tenth of a second, increasing the size difference, never letting his eyes off his target. And then he thrust his weapon at the chief's left shoulder. The Gnostics knew the human was going to do something, but not exactly what, still anticipated where he would be hit, and so was already prepared to divert and dodge the attack, but the attack suddenly stopped before even reaching him. This confused the Gnostics for the briefest of instants, but that was enough for the lost child, as with an almost growl breaking his stone-cold face, he continued his assault, pushing his entire upper body weight behind his attack. The Gnostic's eyes wished slightly as he blocked with the upper body of his spear, but it was in vain. He couldn't block the attack from the lost child. He was caught off guard, and it was made in such a way he was forced to use the most damaged part of his weapon due to how frequently it was used during this fight. It was on purpose that much he related, and he also realized this was going to be unpleasant. The spear broke Akwi's weapon in half. It flew high and spun into the air, while Liam's weapon went through it and continued and connected with his shoulder, and it broke apart, transferring enough force to crack open several human skulls in rapid succession. What was heard was a loud sound of wood snapping followed by an echoing pop and crack sound. Then the Gnostics felt himself gravity abandon its hold on him as he was lifted from the ground by at least a third of his height and flew for at least his height in length before falling hard on the soft purple-green grass. There was silence. The crowd looking in shock, only a small portion he going to understand what happened while the others registered what they were seeing. Liam moved, face calm and a faint satisfied smile on his face. His weapon falling to the ground, he crouched down. He remarked that Gnostic's eyes were lost in thought, his breathing ragged. The lost child did a strange action for the native. He gave his left hand toward the right and waited. Akwi, even if confused with the action, grabbed the hand with his right and was then yanked up by the smaller being, as if he weighted less than a leaf, and the strength behind the grip made him feel like his bone might as well be twig for the lost child. Akwi's eyes cleared up as he properly propped himself up with Liam's help, the agony around his shoulder only helping, but even a smile, if pain appeared, and only grew bigger as his. A strange sight for Liam, and even more for everyone else present, particularly Miruk. Ha ha ha, Che. Incredible. Simply incredible. ARK, you hit hard. You were something else? That was a very good trick. The Oloikton broke the pending silence. A slightly pained expression on his face as he breathed in and out. His left shoulder shagging, he closed his eyes and he grabbed it with his right hand, and in one swift motion, slocked it back and placed a muffled groan of pain escaping his lips as a result. Damn, I hope I didn't damage his shoulder too much. Liam thought at the sight of someone popping his shoulder back in as if it was nothing. On another note, he didn't understand why Akwi was so happy. Then he understood why, and that greatly changed how he saw the Gnostics. A battle junkie, one that might as well be his great-grandpa in terms of age. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 43. The time of great sorrow to come. A few minutes later after the spar, Liam was back wearing his chest plate. Backpack placed to the side, he was in a structure akin to a teepee, but exponentially bigger, almost the size of a house. Roughly cut wood beam with bones holding a hide sewn of various animal skin, some not even from the plains. In front of him, sitting upon a stone covered in soft plant material with a backrest, was Akwi, his face twisting in pain as the Tsahik tended to his left shoulder. You asked for this, Akwi. Stupid actions earn you stupid, dangerous consequences. You're lucky it was a spar. I can see yet again why you are the father of your son. He got the stupidity from somewhere, Marali said in a low tone. The emotion behind was a hint of something akin to mockery for the Oloikton's actions. She took a concoction that was shimmering above a small fire at her right side with her wrinkled hand, killing the fire with a clay plate as she did so before giving it to Akwi. It was a mix of the pink aloe vera, something akin to honey but gold in color, and a mix of powdered plants. Ignoring the old hag's words, the same words he heard hundreds of times, he gulped as rapidly as he physically could the mixture, stopping himself from gagging at the taste. For a human, it would taste sweet with a hint of spiciness, but again, the equivalent of taste buds for Nasics were fundamentally different from humans' ones in every aspect besides their function as one of the senses. You hit hard, Liam, and by all means, you surely did hold back. It felt as if my shoulder was going to be ripped off, Akwi said toward the human, who simply nodded before he continued. What did you want to speak about? Things are going to shift in a direction I cannot predict nor control, but one that will lead to great and many death. Liam's face hardened and he spoke, the entire atmosphere becoming deadly silent. On the side, one frowned Akwi, face becoming solemn, while Marali stayed calm, composed as if knowing, and both the chief and Lost Child knew she knew more than she let out. Extremely annoying, but she was rational and wanted only the good of her clan, even if she was senile. The leading figures, Sky people of the RDA, as you must know, are a leading factor behind the conflict between both species, he continued, stating the obvious, and both knew what was to be announced would be unpleasant. I understand. This fact is known for some time to the point it could be considered old. But this is none of our matter, Akwi said, not really following where Liam was going, while the Tsahik only closed her eyes pensively. It is indeed not, but it will. Even if indirectly, they will not stop until the All-Mother is stripped bare of all of her valuable resources. Liam continued with no small amount of venom and something akin to despair at something out of his control. This is an inevitability. I do not know when, but it will happen. The conflict will but expand, and expand. The ones leading RDA will not abandon their cash cow using diplomacy, particularly with the people being judged as simple-minded wild beasts needing to be tamed or culled to extinction. War will happen, that's a certainty. Even if Cripple Guy succeeds, the RDA will still want more and more until nothing valuable remains of consequence to everything but themselves be damned. But for an alliance between most clans to happen, more than my words are needed, Liam thought. Thanks to Overseer and his communication with the two scientists, he was aware of many ongoing things about the RDA, such as Jake Sully. Though as of now, nothing truly concrete on the manpower and full resource of Hell's Gate. This lack of more concrete data was because neither Grace nor Max had the necessary clearance level or authority to have access to such data. But Liam still got an overall idea and a grasp of most of what the RDA down on Pandora had, such as what material their equipment and vehicles are made of, like windshields made of a type of synthetic gem, as hard as diamond, but resistant to extreme physical strains and temperature variation, while the metal used is, to put it mildly, whatever was found in the ground that made mediocre alloys for what it must for, but nothing exceptional. Not that they couldn't do better, they simply didn't have the need to. After all, the savages don't have anything to fight them. Another point was that the RDA machines weren't the newest, some being 4 decades old and from outdated, if slightly altered blueprints for Pandora's hazardous environment. Blueprints he couldn't get his hands on due to them being inaccessible to the two scientists again. And for more than hierarchical reasons, the blueprints were stored within the computers that controlled the giant 3D printer-like machines. They didn't craft their own machines by hand with those printers at hand, and it translates as one of the reasons why there was a great lack of engineers, but it was compensated by non-self-aware AIs that were tasked with cleaning toilets, helping carry heavy charges, regulating the air quality, to building and repairing aircraft and other menial tasks. It was their purpose, and that made them a weakness. The RDA here was limited in terms of manpower, resources, and machine, and they didn't use the top of the top in terms of technology due to various laws, cutting corners, and how old the base was, but all way more advanced than technology he was used to before this. Powerful, but not invincible, and most important of all, the ones in their possession were arrogant and ignorant. Conflicts he couldn't stop, at best directly influencing now, will put him as a target and not stop the RDA from continuing its activities one bit, as they will divert a figment of their earlier mentioned resources, specifically aiming for him. The ex-Marine will learn about him, Jake was playing the spy within the Omaticea clan, not realizing he was going native, and that means mention of his existence will be brought up as he learns their language and ways. And it's what happened. Even if it's under his title, he knew of this because Grace asked with Overseer, and he gave an affirmative response. He supposed this brought up various other questions, but as far as he knew, she didn't ask any. But being discovered this way was a thing he was aware of from the moment he was in contact with the native. Gnostics will speak about him to others, be they other Gnostics, Avatar, or humans, or Iwa herself. His secrecy was going to be not so secret in the next few months. And then there were people like Norm Spellman, Grace's new assistant. He supposed this new one will also need to be informed about him to avoid potential complications, as from what Max told, it was almost a mental breakdown for Grace. In another aspect, he was glad Grace had the immediate response of taking Jake and Norm to a remote base in the Hallelujah Mountains. Though unknown to her, it helped him. It gave him more time, and it has happened, Grace having asked if he was this individual with this title, and his answer was affirmative. He was and could only prepare, not being alone being one of them. The Olangi clan being the first on the list, he wasn't a leader, at least not in that sense, and wouldn't act as such, not that he ever could. The Gnostics, even if on friendly terms, wouldn't let this happen like this, even if it was a direct order from Iwa herself. He didn't lie to himself that he was and will be alienated. He wasn't one of them. Never pretended to be or ever wanted to. But his words would hold a lot of weight, and he will make sure they do, even if it means the usage of force. Akwi frowned, face deep in thought. This was sudden, not what he expected, or more precisely what he didn't wish to hear. Deep down he knew conflict was inevitable, but he couldn't play the ostrich for all of his life. He couldn't comprehend what it truly entailed, the scale of it that is outside of what was told being horrifying and true. He trusted the lost child's words, never would he doubt him, but there must be other options, as he was aware of what it meant. War, a word rarely if ever heard. Gnostics' conflicts were rare, though only in rarer cases they became bloody. And as for war, it wasn't a foreign concept. Only a few instances of such events truly were heard of. One that affected the entirety of the people was supposed to be the reason the 3 laws of Iwa existed. He personally experienced many battles. He was a warrior, but if what he heard was correct, and even if he underestimated them, the sheer madness of what they represented. Birds of metal impervious to the strongest of arrows shot by the most skilled of archers that would rain down fire from the sky upon the land without discrimination. Metal weapons that with loud, deafening noise and flash of light killed instantaneously from a great distance. Suit of metal that made them fight on equal ground. And giant creatures of metal bigger than anything from the land should be capable of devouring entire forest in mere days. Akwi didn't fully believe, all due to Tale's tendency to twist facts, but he understood it held way more than a few inklings of truth, and in any case, he wasn't delusional. He couldn't see how winning was even a possibility. Not presently, and as is. If they could cause great damage to the respected clan of the Omaticea in the rainforest where they are at their strongest, he doubted on open fields his clan would fare better. Though he didn't despair or feel great fear. But we have time. Not much, not even for the rainy season to end, but that is what we have, and the time I have estimated before the war start. Liam tried and failed to reassure both his interlocutors, but they were not the ones to panic for so little. This isn't pleasant, a great calamity, a time of great sorrow you are speaking of, but one that wasn't unanticipated. I believe you, as your words echo the ones of the All-Mother. If you deem it apt to speak with us now, then you have plans, Liam Cram. May we know them, and what do you ask for? You have reasons, you follow rationality and the path to survival. That Syke said matter-of-factly, seeing where Liam was going but not what he wanted. Yes, that is correct. It isn't truly out of the sole goodness of my heart. It is for my own interest, my own gain, my survival. The RDA purpose will not shift when my existence becomes widely known to them. I will become another target, he said, voice getting colder by the second but holding only the truth. I will need your help, the help of your clan, the help of the ones under you, and that of many more. And you will need mine, they will need mine. This is born out of our mutual interest. Neither of us will survive without uniting. His implant glowed progressively brighter and brighter as more words came out. Indeed, the future is bleak, but there is light. A light we can reach only with a form of unity. You have a better understanding of the sky people than us, but For this unity to happen, someone capable of untiring the clans must be chosen by the All-Mother. The Toruk Macto, Marali agreed almost instantly with the lost child. Yes. There was this in the movie with Jake. Liam thought it was something Sumong, the Anurai wandering artist, spoke fondly about, but it didn't click. He simply thought of it as a random but important legend. A legend speaking of a warrior, savior, and leader having tamed a Toruk, great Leonopteryx, the largest and most majestic flying creature of this moon, an ultimate predator to aid within times of great sorrow. But ultimate predator as it wasn't rocket-proof, or would like having a multi-ton helicopter ram into its chest at full velocity, and he held great doubt on the rider's capability of uniting the various clans. Not forgetting if someone like that appeared at all to begin, thought Iwa will intervene, that he could almost feel it. But the Toruk Macto wasn't going to be him. It needed someone reckless and self-sacrificing, and someone physically capable of taming an adult Toruk. He could hatch one, but getting an adult one. No, he couldn't, and if he even could tame such a creature in this way, it was extremely risky to a suicidal degree. A Toruk Macto was a hero which he wasn't and didn't want to be. There will be luck involved, and why he was stacking the odds in his and the people's favors. Akwi didn't speak. He wanted to convince himself Liam was overreacting and overestimating the RDA and how horrible they could be, but the words of Marali drenched the amber of doubt to his great sadness. And so he lifted his right hand, attracting the attention of the other two. The Olanji clan will support and ally with the lost child for what is to come, and I vow upon my name, blood, and soul to uphold those words. Personally, those words I will uphold, savior of my son, and the Tsakarem, an architect of metal. What do you have planned for the future, Liam? The Oloichton said at the end with an almost feral smile forming at the end, his yellow eyes staring into the silvery one of Liam. On the side, Marali closed her eyes. This will need an apt ceremony under the Tree of Divergence. Such words Akwi said weren't light, such as the subjects involved. It needed to be officialized with the clan. War was going to happen whether she liked it or not, and it was the same for every member of the Olanji clan. The elders will not be pleased, while some as the others were warriors and wanted to be back on the ride. People of all ages and sexes will die. Yet she wasn't despairing. On the contrary, she felt confident. Yet still a deep feeling of sadness was within her old heart for tragedies that are to come, and not only for her clan. Liam nodded and said, a thin, confident smile forming as he opened his backpack and took several objects. Their technology is flawed, primitive in many points. It has many weaknesses, exploitable ones. Words of extreme arrogance to some, but holding yet again only the truth. The RDA has access to technology from 2150 and uses the one from 2050. Laws or not, they could do better, but they didn't. They can use antimatter safely and have a super metal that broke the regular laws of physics. A century is an eternity in terms of technological advancement with the use of modern standards of advancement, and even more for him. Primitive in many aspects or not, the RDA on Pandora is still the most powerful by a long shot. Anyway, the objects consisted of two long and thin black smoothen pieces of wood, both with different ends that he clipped together. Akwi realized what this was at this instant. Then the strange stone objects he added one by one until it made a strangely shaped arrow to then add in the other end red flat piece of material only confirmed it. An arrow, one adapted to Na6, as it was nearly Liam's length and height. An arrow? The chief mumbled visible confusion on his features. Outside of looking odd if masterfully crafted and unbalanced, it didn't look like much. Yes, but one that creates fire. An explosion. An explosion is only possible with the black liquid found underground, Liam said after putting the arrow together. It was way bigger than the one he usually does. For him, it was a lance. This size let him put a more explosive concoction within the arrowhead for a stronger explosion, which here is made of ceramic. Even metal such as bronze will be better. It wasn't a random decision. He switched from bronze to ceramic here. Metal will be more resilient to shock and the environment, so safer and more stable. That was a fact, but it cost more in resources, skill, knowledge, and time. The first three only he possessed and didn't have the last to teach in so little time. And ceramic here used clay, so it was not a metal from the ground. Adding that the petroleum used for the explosion, that he didn't know how Gnostics will react, as he didn't know what it represented for them, was that I was blood, some other fluid of the tree goddess, or something totally unrelated. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 44. War effort. After Liam's spar with the Oloikton and his gift of the explosive arrows, things drastically changed. He showed them the arrow's power by letting Akwi test it on a rotting tree void of life in an area where no wildfire would have happened. His recent light injury did not stop him from using his bow. He had gotten way worse. The chief was, to put it mildly, horrified by the sheer destructive power, but also amazed and fascinated at it if the smile was any indication. What was once a tree, a third the size and girth of the one at his base, had become a fuming stump, adding the light of the explosion and the shock waves that shook his bones to the core, resonating deeply within his cranium. If it didn't blow up the RDA helicopter's blades, it would greatly damage them and cause the vehicle to become almost uncontrollable in the air, potentially leading to a crash. Flying was a complicated process, one problem, and gravity work again. They weren't alone, and many show it after this event. Words of what was to come were announced by the Tsahik, Marali, and traveled in the entirety of the clan. It didn't please anyone, some believing, some not wanting to believe, but you can't deny reality. Reality does not care how you feel at any given moment, and reality was that a war was coming. It was drastic and out of the blue, but the announcement still hadn't had as much backlash as Liam anticipated. The opposite even. It didn't mean it was met with euphoria, but neither did it was met with the other extreme that was despair. What followed a few days later was a short ceremony where an official alliance was made. Present there were Liam, Marali, and Akwi, followed by the elders of the clan and more than Gnostics, all adult and able-bodied fighters. It was nearly the entire clan, only being omitted the young from infants to teenagers, the pregnant females, the injured, sick, and weak. It was a strange experience for Liam. He could remember it with extreme clarity. It was underground, precisely within the chamber where the Tree of Divergence was located. To go there, he took Daisy, his slinger head, he put in a backpack of leather made for this purpose. A fact that surprised the Olanji clan members, but that was a welcomed one. In fact, it was something done regularly in their culture. But for this, they needed to kill the slinger's body, which they ate to collect the living head, then tamed it temporarily to use the pheromones it produced. The pheromones were collected and stocked in a sort of dried-up fruit with a long and complicated process to then be filled with the regular heavy crude oil. Webb, the super dense one, found underground to conserve and transfer their property in the renewable petroleum. The mixture was then painted on specialized garments, as the mixture irritated Gnostic's skin greatly, which might cause hallucinations and cause irrational fear. At least that's what Tati told him as to how they explored the depth and relative safety. Primitive didn't equate to stupid or less capable of improving and adapting to hurdles. The fact the head needed to be alone was important, as it produced this pheromone only when separated. He could guess it does this because it became incredibly vulnerable while in such a state. The body did the opposite of the head. It produced a pheromone that attracted prey, and he was sure those creatures knew how to use it. Both functions he could see many uses. Anyway, the chamber of the Tree of Divergence was magical, otherworldly. This effect of surrealness, not having dissipated even if it was the second time he came down here. The pearly white bark and roots intertwined above a pond of a liquid so dark it almost absorbed the soft lavender light emitted by the inverted tree above. Liam walked in full armor. His helmet was opened, his feet treading carefully to not slip. Even with the grip below his boot, he was extremely heavy. His helmet was attached to his hip as several dozen of wood sprites floated all around him as soon as he entered, focusing in particular on his implant. This caused great surprise within the Gnostics, the elders in particular. He also felt as if an invisible gaze was on him, one that was amiable. It was confusing to feel the underlying intent behind something like this brushing against him both physically and metaphysically. He had felt this presence last time, but not this clearly and intensely. And so after a few minutes the ceremony began. The Tsahik and Oloikton below the tree connected their queue to the bioluminescent tendrils that would be this tree's equivalent of leaves. It was followed by the rest of the Gnostics sitting cross-legged, they as well connecting their queue, but with the roots instead, a white pulse of bioluminescent light echoing with the ripple of the petroleum below. As for him, he stayed awkwardly to the side body covered in wood sprites as if hugging him. He didn't have a clue on what to do. Not the fault for not having asked, but not having any clear answer. What he knew was that it was to be one with Iowa and the ones that you will fight with within troubled times. This you always keep a part of them within you, even after death, and even if their spirits repose with the All-Mother. Something that could be interpreted in a lot of ways with the words themselves and the translation in English not diminishing the options. Connecting to the tree like everyone else was not a real option, as it entailed him falling unconscious by envenoming himself with Daisy's venom. He trusted the two leaders of the Olangi clan, but not to that degree, and in any case it was something he didn't feel would be apt here. They were communicating with their ancestors, he could only guess. In any case, it was a very important and private moment for them. He stayed this way for 10 minutes before every Gnostic disconnected at the same time. Faces serene and solemn faces calm, and what followed was something he would put on the doing of Aztecs from ancient times, but with no death involved. In total silence, the Tsahik walked toward a naturally shaped cavity within the white roots, and she slid her wrist with the blade of her necklace. A small and precise incision in one swift motion. Red droplets dripped within for several seconds until no blood dripped. The tree pulsed an ethereal light. Then the Oloikton, who with his own blade did the same. After the elders one by one repeated the motion, followed by the other Gnostics, all happening in a religious and heavy silence. Each time the tree pulsed with light. Then the only one not having done this ritual was him. The wood sprites floated a bit away, but never left him as he looked in confusion at the Tsahik and Oloikton for a brief moment on what to do. Liam approached the cavity. It was almost like an altar, one that was a third filled with the blood of a few hundred individuals, the sweet smell from the petroleum below and that of the blood wafting in the air, not being as uncomfortable as he would like. He sighed and closed his eyes before his right gauntlet unclasped itself with a simple flick of his right hand, while for his left a small knife shot out of his wrist as he grabbed it, and did as the ones before him. The cut was done without hesitations on his part. It was clean, perfect, and already slowly healing due to its nature. This forced him to flex his muscle, increasing the amount of blood dripping. His blood was thicker than any Gnostic's, almost viscous. It was of a dark scarlet. He knew his blood was extremely rich in nutrients, oxygen, and more. He didn't do it with his left wrist, due to an element being in higher concentration in that area than any other part of his body. His implant didn't work on magic, even if for many the difference is non-existent. Though he doubted it would have done anything, and even then, it would take several decades for something to happen and several liters of blood while in a highly radioactive environment. But prevention is better than cure, considering an error could, in the worst case scenario, end in the entirety of life within the Milky Way, and he wasn't fully aware of everything. The tree emitted another soft pulse of light, the most powerful of all. The mixture of blood not oxidizing at the contact of air due to how fast the entire ceremony happened. Just as the last, and still no one spoke, the Tsahik crouched down and took at her waist what appeared to be a chalice carved from a bone. She filled it with the dark red liquid almost to the spilling point, and Liam's suspicion came to become true about what was going to happen. She gave the chalice to him in an extremely respectful manner, with slow L and methodical movement. Drink, and you will be as one with us for the great time of sorrow that is to come, and for as long as life is within you. Liam Cram, lost child, architect of metal, honored savior, and guardian of knowledge, may by this act a part of us be part of you. Iowa and our ancestors be our witnesses, the Tsahik said, her voice low and soft, yet enough to echo in the chamber, for everyone to hear. Liam closed his eyes, stopped breathing, and did as asked, drinking the entire contents of the chalice in one gulp, his face slightly cringing at the coppery taste and how strange this entire situation was. It wasn't even that disgusting, but extremely weird. Wrong even from his point of view, but he put himself in that situation, and there were worse things. He simply assumed the consequences. This was followed by the Tsahik and Oloikton doing the same, while he brought his left hand to his mouth, invoking water from his inventory to wash away the taste. And that was how he became an ally in blood, or blood brother, Someone from another clan, or in his case species that allied for as long as life was within them to one of the horse clans through this sacred if bloody ceremony that made them akin to a member of the clan, yet not truly one. A family member, yet a stranger. It was more symbolic than anything, but the symbolism is everything within Gnostics culture, not much different than humans. At least here, there wasn't any child sacrificed. Day 220, the 10th of August in the middle of the day. So Grace got the green pass to go to Home Tree, though with the delay, it must have been at minimum 3 days ago. Liam noted data from his armor connected to Overseer letting him know of the most recent message from the Xenobotanist. He continuously tweaked it, changing and optimizing it for the best result, and adding the Overseer program to it was logical. Adding quality of life features was all he could truly do, though it was working and mostly finished on his shoulder turret. As for the Pandorium, quite a bit of progress was made. He managed to melt by transferring the energy generated by an induction forge toward the metal. Ineffective and pretty slow, but it worked. The fabricator, while very useful, couldn't do everything. A tokamak, a machine to produce plasma, then said plasma would be used as the heating energy of a forge. It would be what he wanted, but he did with what he had on his hands. Such an advanced machine was not possible for now. A metal he was pretty much still ignorant about outside, that it could be used as a stupidly powerful and versatile magnet that could be used in anything you want for any purpose that will require the intervention of the law of electromagnetism, depending on how you shape its molecular structure from how it was cooled down to what other elements were used. It has the potential to make said fundamental force your bitch. In a 3D space of existences, so to say. Little and vague were what he learned, but it was still very exciting, and it pushed him to want to learn more. So many possibilities, but so little time, he didn't really have much time for studying this incredible material. Things went relatively fine from what he got on Grace's side. Jake was still oblivious about him being human, but he still was aware of him as the lost child, and that he was a strange hairy creature standing on 2 legs, with a strange glowing metal bit in its wrist. If it was a simple denial of reality, or that he didn't really care or thought it was some random fairy tale nonsense of the native, or that Jake was as sharp as a hammer, Grace's words not his, or a mix between the 4, Liam didn't know, but the longer it stayed this way the better. As for the metal bit, he didn't receive a question from Grace, but he will still need to mention it. There have been other topics of discussion in tandem, such as when and where a potential meeting could be decided. Shit will hit the fan soon, he thought with a deep dissatisfied frown, his silver-gray eyes gazing at nothing in particular. Did I make a mistake? Please tell me I didn't in front of the lost child. A small squeaky voice interrupted his internal rambling, and he looked down. It was a preteen modeling clay into a precise shape, one of the components of the ceramic explosive arrowhead. No, I was just lost in my thoughts, and you don't have to worry. That is remarkable work you have done there, Aleia. He praised the Gnostics with a gentle smile, something that seemed almost wrong with his features. A compliment that did hit home, as the Gnostics immediately get back to work with great enthusiasm. He remembered every Gnostic's name, face, and character he ever met and spoke to. Not because he particularly spent a lot of time individually with each. He picked those instinctively, and they never left his memories. What Aleia was doing was participating in the war effort. Surprisingly, this wasn't Liam who gave them the idea, but Maruk, even if he was going to do it. The teen felt useless and didn't want to feel like this, so he acted. So Liam taught them how to do ceramic based on clay with various mixes to have different results, but here was the one used for the arrowhead. The way how to make red silicon and use it to make the fletching plastic vein of the arrow via the use of mold and a hardening process using several plants. As for the arrow's shafts, only a certain type of wood was used. All of the components of the arrows follow relatively strict parameters to him, but vary for the Gnostics, particularly the arrowhead that needed to be an explosive hazard before being shot if it ever got damaged. Good things he taught the metric system and more before. It was of the utmost importance to have precision here. Explosives might be toys, but they are very, very dangerous toys. Alas, even precaution doesn't stop potential accidents from happening, even more so when it wasn't him doing the arrow. A fact the Olangi understood, as he was quite vocal on the potential dangers, scaring a bit more than a few from ever using them, but they will unless death is what they want. The most dangerous aspect of the RDA on what was to come is their air advantage. If some need to die for others to learn, then so be it. He has done as much as he possibly could. This detail also pushed the ones in the war effort to work with as much care and precision as they mentally and physically could. The quality of their work will decide whether their clan may survive or die. A very important task. In a war of such importance, everyone needs to participate in one way or another. Forcing children to work was not something Liam was a fan of, even less since it was to make weapons, but the morals of a 21st century man from a first world country held little importance here. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 45. Second meeting with the Tree Goddess. Day 229. The last few 9 days and the one before had been extremely productive with a total of nearly 500 explosive arrows made, a fourth of which were done by him. Productive, maybe, but not enough for Liam's comfort. The collection of the extremely dense oil necessary for their fabrication was easy with the clan accord. Even if Liam learned it wasn't so much of a problem to collect it, all was good as long as no harm was done to the Tree of Divergence. The Gnostics weren't unfamiliar with using it as well for various rituals. Though he didn't divulge the formula as it was pointless since he could largely produce enough of it on his own, and the Gnostics didn't possess the technical equipment and knowledge to begin with for them to be of any help. The number of arrows wasn't his only worry. He had no viable answer for direct defense against artillery outside of using the environment and tricks. He didn't hide the weapons the enemies would have, such as firearms from sniper rifles, regular rifles, pistols, and shotguns, of which all Gnostics except one were feeling from unease to fear, but it only seemed to give them even more motivation to win. They named them death sticks. You pointed at something, pressed the trigger, and what you pointed at, it gained a new hole. The exception was Maruk, who, to put it mildly, became utterly fascinated while Titi realizes that the bang-bang creatures that were around Liam's home could have killed them, and to know the lost child was in possession of such creatures was extremely reassuring. The fact he knew this much earned questioning gaze from them, Acqui in particular, and as such he didn't hide he had an allied connection within the RDA, but that they were weak within and could but give snippets of information. This revelation went without a problem, his words being almost equal to that of the Tsahik and Olo Eichton, as he was their blood brother, and someone that time and time again proved to be trustworthy. It helped morale as well. But even then, that wasn't going to cut it for Liam. Overseer will see new future use as the programs didn't stay without updates or nasty surprises. He didn't connect to the main and subsystems of Hell's Gate for one reason: to stay hidden and lay low, though he did some probing and asked questions to make sure it would somewhat work. He was no hacker, never coded as a sous chef, and he wasn't all-knowing on that subject, but still, one if not the most knowledgeable on Pandora on that subject. Either way, he knew enough to cause extensive damage. And in the worst of worst-case scenarios, having the possibility of shutting down the entire base was here. Even if it will kill everyone from infants to random innocent workers, mercenaries, and even the 2 scientists he started to see as friends. He wasn't one to do much in precision when it was to get rid of a threat when no other choice remained. The humans needed a perfectly controlled environment where each parameter could make the difference between life and death. He absolutely didn't want to do this and greatly doubted he even could do it, but having the option was a must. Currently, Liam was alone, deep in the depth of the Great Plain. Extending his armored left hand, a miniature crossbow appeared on the upper part, the metallic string drawing itself back that ended with a soft click when it was armed. Right after reality bent, and a metallic arrowhead appeared neatly within the crossbow. Attached to it was a cable that led to a coil that appeared within the closed palm of Liam. A simple trick on how he could use his inventory. He had a small cylindrical area of which his implant was the center of around 8.10 centimeters, 3.2 in radius and 37.10 centimeters, 14.6 in length. In this designated area, except from inside him of his body and matter in a more or less solid state of being, he could summon what was inside his inventory. Their size and volume were not important, as they didn't strictly follow what one might call regular physics. The rest was simply practice, like a muscle, to gain better control and precision, letting him do what he just did. He snuffed a yawn out, his line of sight multiplied tenfold by his helmet. He moved his left hand up. The sound of the string being snapped shut echoed as the bolt flew out, the cable enrolling itself between his index and middle finger as it followed it. It planted itself deeply within a root above, while 3 claws in the arrowhead snapped open, locking it where it was. Tugging it with a bit of force several times to see if it held correctly, Liam then entangled the cable to his left hand, then put a foot behind and hunched slightly over, letting gravity to the test as he fell, advancing toward a lower root. Pressing a button on the side of the coil, and the hook within the root above detached itself, and the cable rapidly reeled itself back. He repeated this process several times, rapidly going down until he was in front of a hole in the cave's wall, purple light emitting out of it. Right where he wanted to go. He didn't get attacked by any creature as he got the scented petroleum from the Olangi, who knew he was down there but not exactly why. Even with explosive arrows, an entire clan backing him up, allies within the RDA, and a trump card he wanted, he and the Gnostics needed more. To be certain a victory was assured and the loss of life on their side was as minimal as possible. Entering, he was met with the now all too familiar, but still otherworldly sight of the Tree of Divergence. The sound of his footsteps echoed as he approached. His helmet unfolded, revealing his face. Wood sprites floated all around him and towards each of the entrances and exits, creating white barriers with their small and delicate floating body. The ever-presence of something greater, yet not in the air, focused on him with a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Liam's upper armor, from belly to head, then unclasped itself. It was stored within his inventory. This revealed the form-fitting nylon titanium chainmail suit underneath, which was then unzipped and taken off cleanly without a hurdle, making him bare-chested. That was oddly sexual. Whatever, Liam thought amusedly as he walked toward one of the thickest intertwined roots right below the base of the tree. It looked almost like an armchair, even if the term throne would be more apt, but that thought was dashed aside as he sat on it, and a small syringe filled with a translucent blue liquid appeared within his left palm. Slinger's venom. Daisy's venom, to be exact. The quantity, unknown to him, was enough to permanently paralyze and potentially kill a grown elephant bull, and would do the same to him if his nervous system couldn't purge foreign substances and regenerate itself with extreme effectiveness. "Let's do it," he mumbled. Gazing up, he saw hundreds of wood sprites dancing in the air. He sighed softly. His heart beat faster and stronger in trepidation as he felt 5 dozen thin, furry tendrils growing out of the roots embracing his back. He stabbed the needle right into the most prominent vein of the crook of his right arm. Injecting the venom, he felt nothing for the first few seconds as the foreign substance circled through his body. Then a burning sensation was felt all over his body for a good minute. Then the unpleasant sensation suddenly vanished, as if the pain was but a foreign concept. He stored the syringe in his inventory. The feeling over his right arm was the first to go as he closed his eyes. Letting himself go, he felt the brunt force of all the stress and exhaustion bottled up suddenly go as more of his rapidly numbing body got covered in a blanket of wood sprites and thin roots tendrils. The last sensation was both numb and clear. His implant was covered by the thin roots in a cradling manner, in a way his entire exposed body was. It shouldn't be comfortable by all metrics, yet he found it so. And so he fell into a mix between a coma, a sleep, and a vegetative state due to a venom-induced vegetative state. Liam's eyes opened again to a different sight, an ever-shifting skin between a human and a transparent film letting him see blue and purple veins and nerves. He unfolded his completely nude body from its fetal position, his mind crystal clear and structured, and all emotions muted to the extreme as he gazed around. Still as fascinating, he mumbled, willing the hexagonal metal structure to float above his palm. His voice as deep as in the physical world, but with an inhuman echo to it and echoes. He suddenly shifted himself up as he felt a familiar presence. Indeed, it is a fact that will never change, but you, even more so, you're different not only in form, but in nature and quality. Body and mind and soul can be dissociative in infinitely rare cases and have unique qualities to them, be they positive, negative, or neutral in effect. But even you are different from the ephemeral beings that are my children and the children from worlds of far distant stars. But that is not to hear our words about this subject that you have come down here, Liam, correct? The unnerving and enchanting voice of the All-Mother resonated from below him, even if directions as a concept held little value in such a place. Liam looked down and saw the spirit form of the Tree of Divergence gazing up at him. Then the space suddenly shifted and both were in a face-to-face position. The dissension between futuristic living technology and an untampered primeval alien forest, both pulsing at different rhythms and with distinct energy. All for both of them to see. He noted the lack of little one and wanted to learn more about what she was speaking of, but she was right. He didn't come here to speak about body, mind, and soul. And by ephemeral being, did she mean mortals? To her scale of time, a 100,000 years old being will be as mortal as one who lives 30 minutes. In any case, this was a question for a less tumultuous time. Greeting Iowa, this is correct. I have come to request of you for your direct intervention in the incoming war. He moved slightly forwards and said both firmly and calmly, perfectly aware of what his request entailed and how arrogant it was. There was a long, drawn-out silence before the fragment of the All-Mother spoke again, a thin, inhuman smile forming over her elegant wooden feature. We do not intervene more than what is deemed necessary in those matters. The wars and conflicts of our children are not ours to solve, as it impedes their growth and development. Too much death, each a life with dreams, regrets, purposes, and a part of us, all but vanished due to our past mistakes, she said sadly, the several hundreds of tendrils that were her hair flashing slightly brighter. Liam frowned at that. It was what he had expected, but he let her continue. Not that he would have ever stopped her. We have chosen one of the dream walkers of the sky people to be the one to ride the last shadow and lead the clans of my children through the incoming time of great sorrow and bring peace. But that is for him to act upon this opportunity, she added. This was important information. Dream walkers were what the Gnostics called the Avatar's drivers. It was a he-so from what he knew it was either Jake or Norm, as even if there were other male drivers, he seriously doubted Iowa chose someone else. It was an incredible relief to know this, but again, it didn't stop the individual in question from dying. It is not a simple conflict or war with the Gnostics. It is far, far greater. The nature of this war is alien in essence to any conflict the people ever faced and you have seen. Liam paused before continuing to explain his point directly to the goddess. Even with my help and a Toruk Macto of your choosing that will create a coalition of clans, this will not be enough. This war, as you have mistaken, is not only theirs and mine, it is yours. Losing or having a truce is not an option. Losing will end in the total annihilation of the people against them, the enslavement of the others, my capture or death, and destruction of everything you have known, loved, and built. It is not a matter of feeling or wanting. It is a matter of survival for both of us and your children. While a truce is but a delay of the inevitable and will never happen without too great loss. A loss I cannot accept. Each word becomes ever so impactful on the All-Mother. Distress could almost be felt, the cold and calculating kind, as paradoxical as it was making it all the more impactful, yet there was no begging. He was direct, offensively so, speaking to her in a way none had before, like an equal speaking to another, and in a way this wouldn't be far from the truth. He was free of fear in her presence, truthful, and respectful of his own words. Those were one of the few reasons before many more he garnered her interest and more. To say he was the most fascinating existence she ever had the chance to be in contact with during the course of her very long life would be but the truth. He spoke of what he believed was the truth, and it was more than a simple belief. It was reality and its potential consequences. The being in front of her was a realist that saw and knew a lot, too much for his mental health in fact, as she could see. She closed her pearly white, glowing eyes before opening them again and gracefully and slowly approached toward the barrier between the two of them, gliding on the ever-shifting flora as she did so. We dash. She froze. Liam's eyes widened to the extreme, the hexagonal particles around him orbiting faster and faster, while the metal ring around him spun with such a velocity they appeared frozen in time as the world trembled. One of the tufts of hair of the fragment of the All-Mother was suddenly violently ripped off with a fraction of her skull and shredded apart in a shower of crimson-red blood, and she screamed. A scream that was inhuman, incomprehensible, twisted, but yet Liam knew from his very being that no words were needed. The emotions were clear to him in a way he couldn't have thought possible, to the point he could feel them to a lesser degree. And it was a cry full of anguish, pain, loss, despair, disappointment, sadness, regret, and fury. Cold and burning fury. My Patreon, if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 46. The beginning. Liam stared in shock and confusion at the figure of the supposed goddess of this moon scream. Something must have happened, with only a few options he could suppose of on the go, the RDA being at the top, and how he could roughly guess. From the scream to the air and part of the skull being ripped out, and how external damage on the tree translated to the spiritual form, then by that line of thought damage to another part might show it here. And what was damaged was one of the Tree of Souls was destroyed, the most sacred and important place of connection between Iwa and the Gnostics, from Grace, Marali, and the All-Mother herself. He was perfectly aware that these trees were far more than simple sacred plants. They were an integral part of Iwa, the tip of the iceberg that she was, but a majorly important one compared to anything and everything else. If a regular tree might be a singular cell, then, for comparison, one Tree of Soul was like a limb, one of her many, many limbs, but still one. A very notable difference. Its purpose, again, from what he got, was the transfer and storage of minds and souls, whatever it exactly meant, either at distance or by direct physical contact, but the latter offered a better journey of the two. So either it was a belief, or both of those aspects could get degraded. Those trees served as the clearest and direct bridge between the living and dead, between Iwa and her children. He could somewhat understand what such a loss represented. This concept was the one he was the most familiar with, after all. His shock and confusion were short-lived. Barely a microsecond. If it were to be outside, he would have felt panic rise rapidly. But that wasn't the case, and he was perfectly clear-minded. So he acted, even if not sure of what to do. It was an ugly and disturbing sight, and he felt pity even. He didn't like such a sight. Wanted and needed to stop for the simple reason he had more to speak, but with this, even if completely unrelated, will prove his point. He approached the various piece of metal he was protected within, slowly decreasing in velocity. The crimson blood floating within the air started to shift to black, then back to red in an endless, as he placed his ever-shifting hand between his skin and a soft blue translucent skin full of purple and blue vein and nerve. As soon as it happened, her scream got lower, but just as visceral. Yet he didn't stop at that. Pressing his palm further, the barrier became visible, composed of thousand and thousand of hexagon molding against his hand. Distance not being of importance in such a place, but intent, emotions, and feelings were an antithesis to the physical world, a fact he was deeply, instinctively aware of, but held little control over due to his own inexperience, and that this place was not solely his own. And as such, the room they were in fizzled, becoming smaller, as the finger, his outstretched arm protected by a film of shield, came into contact with the middle of the All-Mother's chest. He could feel through the shield, he instantly remarked. It was a type of rugged yet smooth bark through the shield. Root tendrils grew out, but not in a way to trap him, as it was simply holding on him. The bark, her skin in a way he noticed both hot and cold. He could feel her strong heartbeat fused with many, many more, some weak, some powerful, some beating for the first and some for the last. Each living being connected to her, her children, part of her, all functioning in complete harmony amidst the chaos that they represented. It was impossible to describe with mere words what he felt. And he could feel a fraction of the emotion she was going through, almost as if they were his own, and the same was for the pain, both spiritually and physically. Many he couldn't even begin to describe with how alien they were to his mind. But his current nature made it so all were but a minor distraction. Just as he could feel her general state of mind, she could as well, even in such a state. His mind was cold, calm, organized, calculating, filled with curiosity, and with many more incomprehensible aspects, but to her it was beautiful. It was both artificial and natural, a work of art, one that constantly grows and adapts. Yet it was incomplete in a way her near billion years of experience couldn't manage to give an exact answer to. But behind all of this, she caught glimpses of deep anger, grief, loneliness, sorrow, and more, but none of fear or resignation or despair. There was hope present as well. At the forefront of them was a hint of worry mixed with empathy and understanding. Something no one had ever directed toward her. Pity hidden as worry, as if she were in hapless prey in front of a predator. And in many ways, he would be correct. Not in the exact way the lost child might think, but it was not far from the truth either. Many dangers lurked, but it was strange all the same, and not in a bad way. This has never happened before. This moment couldn't continue eternally as much as she, and almost he wanted. Her screams suddenly stopped, and the blood, if it could even be called that, froze, and as time was put in reverse flowed back into the open wound that closed, but the air in that area didn't grow back. The root growing around Liam's hand, holding it, receded slowly within her chest as the deeper connection was severed. And both took a metaphorical breath, with the man taking multiple of such and much deeper one. Our deepest apology to you for what you must have seen and felt, Liam. We are grateful to you for having done what you have done. What happened was the proof that your words are true. Our tolerance has reached its limit since long past, she said, moving slightly backward, her voice going from warm to frigid. You are welcome, Mawa. Though I wonder, you must already know a lot about what I and the Olangi have been working on. I would like to know what you could potentially do. Winning now will not be enough. The RDA and the humans in charge will come and come and come again. They will not abandon, either because of pride or greed for the resource in me. What is going to be a time of great sorrow will be, but the first true skirmish of a great war, Iwa, Liam said gravely, his gaze never leaving her eyes as he shifted back into his cocoon of metal, his being feeling overall strange by what he just did. He could still feel the connection. A new thread was forming, of different nature than his tame. It wasn't dangerous, but he could feel it from the deepest part of his being. Actions have consequences. His words weren't pleasant to hear, but beating the Arctic once wasn't going to cut it. In fact, it would be the start of something greater. Oh, so much greater. It was but the start. Liam didn't delude himself on that. And that was how the discussion for the imminent future went between the local deity and the local anomaly, the two most prominent creatures on this moon, both for the goal of securing their survival and livelihood. Any obstacle between this goal will either submit or be removed by force. A dozen hours later, within the confine of Hell's Gate Biolab, Grace Augustine stared emptily at the mug between her fingers, while to her left Norm Spellman was looking blankly at the wall, and Jake Sully at her right was lazily browsing through one of the many books about Pandora she wrote. All three were forcefully brought from Site 26 to here as Jake, while using his avatar, destroyed many of the cameras from an RDA bulldozer, a giant machine of metal bigger than the vast majority of tanks, with the sole purpose of clearing terrain, and what was in its path was the Tree of Voices. They bulldozed a sacred site on purpose to trigger a response. They're fabricating this war to get what they want, and they are succeeding at getting it, Grace said all of a sudden, breaking the heavy silence. I can't believe it, Norm mumbled in incomprehension and the sheer madness and needless violence that was unfolding. He couldn't know, he didn't want to accept why it was happening, but he knew. Denying reality, sadly, didn't change it. Yup, that's how it's done. How the world works. When people sit on shit you want, you make them your enemy. Then you're justified in taking said shit. Work every fucking single damn time, Jake added, gripping the book harder in visible anger. Running toward them was a young woman, Trudy Chacon, one of the most talented and experienced pilots present on Pandora within the SEC Ops. SEC Ops is running the gunship. They're gonna hit home tree, she said breathlessly. Grave would like to say she was surprised, but she wasn't, and that told too much. Norm barely reacted at such an announcement, still in shock at what happened. When the crippled ex-Marine asked on instinct, face serious and voice concise, but heart heavy. He needed to warn them, to warn the Omaticea, to warn Neytiri. Now, we're spooling you, Dash. She stopped as Grace gripped her hand. The xenobiologist had a conflicted face. Stop, missing a few incendiary rounds won't change the end result. Quaritch thinks it's a game. He won't stop this mission if one of his pilots goes missing. At this point, the supposed hierarchy can go fuck itself. Trudy, you will take us back to Site 26. Immediately, we can't stay here. And Jake, we will arrive on time. I know what you want to do, Grace said in a low tone. Standing up, she made a following with her head and tapped on the screen of her smartwatch. Trudy's expression was conflicted for a short time before she nodded and said, "Does this make us traitors or terrorists? Ah, who cares? Better be that by the solar unity laws than be on the other side." Max on his side felt his own smartwatch vibrate. A blue pictogram appeared on the screen and a pit formed in his stomach. They needed to go ASAP, but he needed to do something else first. He took from his pocket a small black device, a USB key, his mind going over what Liam had been talking about in Overseer. He hated that the man was right and that it was needed. As more time went on, it was clear Liam put himself as an enemy of the RDA for more reason than simple self-righteousness. His life was on the line, and now all of their lives were. Liam had said to transfer this packet of data if things turned for the worse. Max didn't know what it was, but it was easy to guess it was nothing good for the system. He might have just given everyone here a slow and painful death for all he knew. Max advanced toward the main computer. His breath was shaky. He entered several passwords and confirmed his biometric, and with a second of hesitation plugged the key in and waited a few minutes, taking files in and out before disconnecting his account. "I have to go to the bathroom," he said aloud. It was evidently a lie, but it gave him a valid excuse. And so he walked at a brisk pace toward where Grace and her group were dancing. Without wasting time, he lied that he needed to do something else and rapidly moved toward the location of the group of four that Grace just gave him. He didn't take anything but an exopack, a device to breathe Pandora's toxic air. He was in a panic as he almost ran toward the vehicle maintenance hangar. He ignored everyone, rushing toward a particular lone Samson. It was easy. The noise of aircraft starting their flight and the general ordered chaos made it so. And that not every last of the SEC ops knew who he was, and they didn't have any instruction to stop him. A few seconds later, he arrived at his destination, the blades spinning faster than he could perceive, and at the last moment, however, his eyes locked onto the one of Colonel Quaritch in the far distance, who frowned at the sight before anger exploded on his face as he barked orders. The colonel grabbed a rifle from one of his men, aimed, and shot, the sound of the gunshot muffled by everything. At the same time, "Grab my hand, and someone grabs my fucking legs." Jake yelled his lung out, pushing himself off his wheelchair as he expected his hand. Grace behind did as ordered, grabbing the ex-Marine legs while she put Hostile in a safe position to hold everything. Max's eyes widened at that. A smile mixed with anxiety and relief formed. His body not stopping, however. He grabbed the extended hand from the slowly taking of Samson 16 with all his might. Max used both hands as traction, but immediately all noticed Jake was simply physically weak. It was logical. He did exercise, but not with his real body. The lower gravity had a pretty negative effect on humans, causing in short and long-term muscle and bone atrophy without a good diet, medicine, and a strict exercise routine. A problem that was amplified by staying most of the day within a link unit, adding the lack of care, be it either hygiene or the basic necessities of hydration and alimentation, and the consequences were evident for all to see. "Let me help you." Norm placed his belly against metal, leg around a metal bar. He grabbed his friend's hand and started to drag him up, the positive results showing themselves instantaneously. The first bullet missed, grazing Max's neck and leaving a thin trail of blood, but the second immediately after didn't. Max felt intense, burning hot pain for the briefest of instants as the bullet existed on the other side of his neck, shredding his carotid, a portion of one of his vertebral basilar arteries, and cutting straight through his spinal cord. So that's how I die. At least I did serve something, thought Max, smiling deliriously as nearly all feeling from everything below his neck disappeared, just as the strength behind the grip of his hands did. He heard the horrified scream of who he assumed was Grace, and that of Trudy screaming that they needed to go as he fell, and saw the Samson fly away with his rapidly darkening sight. At least they managed to get away. Nice shot as always. He really thought he could go away like this. Do we follow and shoot them down from the sky, Colonel? Or do you want to do that personally at a later date to teach them a lesson? A bald man, Corporal Lyle Winefleet, asked with a smile on his face as his amused gaze focused on the limp, bleeding, and dying scientist on the cement while Samson 16 was flying away at speed, breaking past the RDA reglementation within the base. "It's a damn shame. Trudy was one of our best pilots, but that's a small loss. She was a bad soldier, always hesitating on orders. No, we will not follow them for now. We will let the birdies with a love of blue cheeks fly away." We have more important matters to take care of, such as to bring the knowledge of what a real fire is to the native, Quaritch said, a feral smile finding his way on his face. This was going to be fun. This was what he waited for decades. He got the chance to do it, and he will. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 47 Virus. It has been a bit more than 14 hours since Liam woke up from his second meeting with Iowa. A very impactful event, as when it happened, he could feel the deity in a fundamentally different way. There was a sort of connection, a tie, a bond that was born between both. Waking up after what he just experienced with his heart hammering powerfully in his ribcage and his body covered in root in an almost sensual way was bizarre, though not as unpleasant as one might think. At least it was a very positive result, one of if not the best possible outcomes. But again, when you have a reasonable individual anchored in reality with similar interests, things tend to go very smoothly. It was a weak connection, though. It was more of a general awareness, similar to when he is below the ground facing the Tree of Soul, but everywhere. As such, it was unlike the ones with his tames, not as deep or powerful. He couldn't communicate through it, at least not with direct words. He could feel how she felt in various ways, but that was very blurry, and he supposed she could do so as well. It was a two-way street, both equal. He wasn't sure how to feel about this, but he was instinctively aware, even when he was asleep, that it wasn't a threat to his well-being, and that he could cut it off, but that he didn't exactly know how. It invaded his privacy in a way none could, but again he did this to himself, and he wasn't much better in that aspect as he could do so to her as well. There was no reason to be outraged. And he was sure the All-Mother must possess empathic abilities in the first place, be they psychic in origin or from regular senses, such as the capacity to detect various hormones in the air or read magnetic fields and the likes. He always was a bit of an open book to her. That much he could deduce. Everything on this moon was an extension of herself. At least it equalized things out. He didn't hide it from the Olangi. He couldn't even if he wanted that Sahik, having immediately noticed a change, a shift in how he was. But what he got other than shock, marvel, and disbelief wasn't of much help. It never had happened before, though this wasn't something new with him involved in it. He was an anomaly in many ways. Events never recorded in history were to be expected, though the mention of having managed to get the All-Mother direct help gave a sense of euphoria. It muddled the primal rage they had when they learned the Tree of Voices was cut down, as if it were a vulgar bush. It wasn't where their ancestor reposed, but it was all the same. That Sahik and Sakurem and a few others had already sensed something went wrong, but they didn't think of something like this. Still, Max didn't have to die. It's unpleasant, Liam thought with a deep frown, anger with a hint of sadness hidden within his eyes. Information from Max's smartwatch in his mind. He was aware of his last heartbeat and knew at what exact nanosecond his heartbeat for the last time. His death both was and wasn't in vain. Max's death could have been easily avoided, prevented in so many ways. He didn't have to die, but hyper-focusing on the past wasn't going to help. The one to blame was the one who shot, and only the one who shot. Going to blame others or himself was pointlessness in its perfect form. He was friends with Max, nothing exceptional, but Max was one of his only human contacts. He knew the man quite well, and saying it didn't hurt would be lying. The fact someone after, a bald man under the name of Lal Saw, took the smartwatch as some kind of trophy didn't help. It simply angered him. Thought the smartwatch was perfectly working, and thus Lal Wainfleet, as someone quite high-placed and close to the head of the SEC Ops, let him spy on them since Grace, while alive, wasn't responding. It let him know Home Tree was already set ablaze. And that Grace and Jake were there, in their avatars he supposed, and had helped in evacuating most of the Gnostics. It was sad, but that was life. At least thank you, Max. Now I'm fully in. They're all fucked. They can't even begin to understand how much. And the rest managed or were given the chance to escape. He smirked slightly. He could understand why they could escape. They weren't considered enemies, in the sense they weren't considered a real threat or a threat at all for that matter. No matter the point of view, though, it was still a very stupid decision to let them go. You don't play with food unless you want to be turned into food yourself. He was very grateful for the absolute idiocy of the one who made this decision. It was Quaritch the one who let them go, someone Grace had not painted in the best of light. The war veteran was a sadistic, trigger-happy, psychotic sociopath piece of what worse humanity could give birth to. A rabid dog who, until recently, was on a leash. and comparing a rabid dog to him was insulting the dog. He didn't receive further messages from Grace after the one that said they were coming back to Hell's Gate a day ago, but he could hear everything from her smartwatch, from when she was threatened to be shot, her horrified scream, and where they were going up to when she entered a zone with magnetic disturbance. As for what Max did, Liam could have not needed his help, but it would have led to several problems and limitations. He was immensely grateful for Max's sacrifice, even if he would have preferred for it to not happen, or that Max did this earlier. But convincing someone when you could be considered a being that for all intent and purpose could be a genocidal maniac who you will give access to what would help him enact said genocide was hard. Hard, but not impossible. He only needed the right time to strike, as a subsystem of Overseer was now well hidden within the main system of Hell's Gate, rapidly spreading, mimicking, and slowly eating every primitive line of codes by a copy of the same, but altered code for it to stay hidden until deemed necessary. A virtual cancer, a cancer under his control. You don't make a disease you aren't immune to and in perfect control of after all, or you don't make it sentient and have a sense of self either for that matter. However, as information of what was in direct connection to the main system came, he learned that the vehicles used were in total independent of said system. It was by their designs for the pilots to be fully autonomous. Other than messing with the communication system and some minor unimportant function, he couldn't do much to them. No means to simply turn off their entire army, but still very useful in many, many cases. It wasn't as useful as he had hoped for in a hypothetical best-case scenario, but it was confirmed as the best-case scenario for a reason. It made sense. The Pandorium messed up a lot with technology, and so to have the computer and other important components like the motor and life support of a vehicle not clearly separated was a potential loss of human life and machinery, and is such a great loss in profit. And those machines were made for war in the first place, 130 years in the future of his time. As such, digital war at that time would have extensively progressed and was by all accounts just as much of a threat, if not more. Technology is humanity's greatest strength and weakness. Having a way around such attacks was to be expected. Either way, it was a problem he had prepared for, and why an army with the capacity to destroy them was a must. "Liam, are you all right?" Tuti next to him asked as she finished pouring the explosive concoction within a fist-sized, by Gnostic standard, ceramic recipient. "No, I'm going to speak with Akwi and Marali. You can consider that the war has officially begun." He said those words calmly, almost mechanically, while his pupil stopped acting weird and the metal bit in his left wrist glowing brightly was the telltale of him using his technology via mystical ways. This didn't surprise her. She was anxiously anticipating when he would announce just that. She could already feel and see it from everyone's behavior. The Olangi clan members were preparing their steeds, sharpening their blades, tending to their bows, taking provisions, and more. Liam walked away. Gladius, napping not far away, woke, yawned, stood up, and followed him. Each of the giant bird's footsteps terrifying anyone close enough due to the way it moved its massive claws. There was work to do. At the same time, a few hundred kilometers north of the Olangi camp position, it has been several hours since the Samson 16 with the traders of the RDA had landed at Site 26 within the Hallelujah Mountains. Grace woke up, hair in chaos, face fatigued, and 2 trails of moisture down her eyes. She pushed the door open and stood up from her link unit. Her eyes trailed toward the one of Jake. She frowned. He wasn't waking up, and forcing him awake wasn't an option and even a necessity. Fuck, not the time to think about this. It was obvious he would have deviated from the plan. Grace mumbled and drank a glass of water. The plan in her head was to wait while the life shack was getting attached to Trudy's Samson 16. Jake would try to evacuate the Omadikea, and after waking up to their human bodies, then their avatars would be dragged away by the Gnostics clan, and she then would inform them of who the lost child was, Liam Cram. It wasn't going to happen the way she preferred, but untimely, it didn't matter. Walking toward a holographic screen, she fiddled with it. A connection was made between it and her smartwatch, and she downloaded all the data she had about the individual known as the lost child, aka Liam Cram. She positioned them in a way that would be obvious for Jake, in front of his wheelchair. A picture of Liam's face with his bright and unnerving silver eyes at the forefront. This broke several of the rules set between them, but at this point, she was quite sure the man wouldn't care, and she didn't care either. Failing meant death in both cases. She needed to tell them, and they needed his help, and he will as well, considering the RDA possesses everything. She put on her exopack on her face and exited the life shack, the double door creating a vacuuming zone between the inside from the outside, keeping the two airs separated. Where is Jake? Is everything all right? Norm, who's finished checking if the chain was for the sixth time, asked as he saw her rapidly walk out alone. Still driving? And no. Home tree was destroyed, but we managed to evacuate most of the clan. The Oloikton didn't survive. And we need to go now. We don't have the luxury to wait 10 more hours for him to wake up, she said hurriedly, ignoring her assistant's question as she climbed up the helicopter. But you'll be fine, Norm. This is simply moving the life shack from point A to B. It can still work. The waking up process will be a bit rocky if in flight. Trudy trailed off, arriving behind and placing her hand on his shoulder, a reassuring smile at the end that hid stress, sadness, and nervousness. A few minutes and several final checks later, with the 3 climbs in the aircraft, the 2 rotor blades started to spin, the loud sound of their respective engines, and the winds they made scaring the smaller wildlife as the machine, with the equivalent of a small house in weight attached to it, took to the air. So, where are we going exactly? Trudy asked Grace, who promptly gave her the exact coordinate, an area located 56 kilometers, 34.8 mi, away from a tree of souls within the same floating mountain they were in, an area where the magnetic interference was weaker. 2 hours passed in almost complete silence in the helicopter shuttle. The atmosphere was heavy. The death of Max was still a shock for everyone, Grace being the most affected as she knew him for more than a third of her life. Suddenly losing him put her in a strange state of rage and anguish. She didn't even know who the murderer was. As for Norm, it was different. He didn't know Max for a long time, but that short time let him build a friendship. However, what was on his mind in preparation was the moment of the gunshot. How Max's strength suddenly vanished, and he slipped from his grasp. He didn't sign up for this, but there was no turning back now. Not that he would if he could. He gazed through the heavily reinforced glasses at a super-elevated area within the forest. It was a beautiful place, a lake next to it leading to an enchanting waterfall full of colorful fauna and flora waiting to be discovered. Trudy was the most stable of the 3. She was a soldier for a short time, but still one. She was the less familiar with Max of the 3, as he was more of an acquaintance to her. She was still pissed off and greatly saddened by his sudden and brutal death. That aside, this didn't interfere with her capacity. She controlled her baby down, the Samson, hovering 20 meters, 65.6 feet, above the soft patch of tall grass. As they were blown away by the wind, she moved down slowly and paid great attention to the parameter tied to the cables. She then pressed a button, and the hold of the magnetic cable disappeared from the life shack, and they began to be reeled back. She nodded, pleased. It was perfectly placed from the view of the various cameras around her baby. "Lady and gentlemen, we have arrived at our destination," she said, trying to break the gloomy atmosphere, and it had some success with Norm, earning a snort of amusement from the scientist. Grace stood up, and as she did, her watch suddenly vibrated. Her eyes widened in shock, and a deep voice distorted by the interference, full of confidence, resonated. "Greetings, Grace, Dr. Norm Spellman, and Miss Trudy Chacon. Finally, I'm able to contact you. I'm pleased that you decided to move to one area less affected by the Meissner effect. My name is Liam Cram, and I would like to form an alliance with you against a common enemy. My Patreon, if you want to give me money and have chapters 1 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 48. The reveal. There was a short silence after the words of Liam were heard, followed by the confusion of Norm and Trudy, a confusion that soon will be turned into more. "Grace, could you please move your wrist in a way the screen of your watch is facing up?" The deep voice resonated again, and the person talked to in question did as asked, her face relaxing slightly and a small smile forming. She was quite sure the man on the other side was aware of most of what was ongoing. It was evident. Liam didn't follow what was known as humanly possible. It was as if he was partially omniscient, always aware of what was going on and 10 steps ahead. It was both extremely terrifying and incredibly relieving as he was on their side. His goal was simple and the one of every living being: to survive and not end on a dissecting table. "A pleasure to be able to talk to you as well, Liam," Grace said with a bizarre mix between annoyance, relief, and joy. this time shocking the two others, and it was but the start as a hologram fizzled into existence, showing the origin of the voice. A voice that went almost too well with the person it originated from. It was a human wearing a dark gray, sleek metallic armor of unknown origin, but an advanced one. It didn't hide that it was a heavily muscled man inside it, and his helmet was off, letting everyone see his face. A metallic arm of the same sheen was connected to his left armored shoulder and was where the camera was. Behind him was a hide and various objects with typical Gnostics aesthetic. He stood out. His skin was heavily tanned. His long, dark brown hair was tightly put into Viking braids on his skull. One of his eyebrows had an almost invisible scar going through it. A small trimmed beard adorned his defined jawlines. An almost arrogant smirk showing pearly white teeth with his canine sharper than usual. All of these features gave him a ruggedly handsome face of an intimidating man. It gave the feeling of an individual who will not hesitate to break your neck and bathe in your blood while eating your still-beating heart. But this wasn't what attracted the most attention. His eyes were his severe and calculating eyes of an ethereal silver metallic gray gave the sensation that they were something other than human within. Something not particularly wrong, but off on a fundamental level. It was uncanny. "Who is this?" Norm spoke shell-shocked without realizing. This attracted the full attention of the man in the hologram. He didn't understand what was going on. His first thoughts were that it was someone of the RDA, but the bodily armor was unlike that of the mercenary, or any of the people he knew for that matter. It looked like the type of armor bodyguards of high-ranked individuals would wear. And he would have remembered seeing someone like this. Same was for Trudy. But even then, it was a mere similarity. Good question. Grace has most of the answers to it. She didn't have the opportunity to introduce me to you, so I decided to do it for her. Though Jake is still driving, as I can see. Anyway, we don't have the time for either of you to have a panic attack. You may know me by the Gnostics as the Lost Child, Liam said, his smile growing slightly wider as he let his words sink in. This is impossible, was Norm's first thought. The Lost Child was something that came every so, and then something recent and from what was told benevolent if disrespectful of Iowa like them. But no, this is just someone who arrived, but a human here breathing. How? This doesn't make any sense. Norm tried to make head or tail of the situation at hand, but could but temporarily abandon each possibility of why this Liam was here as absurd as the last. I'm not from the RDA, or any Earth structures of authority for that matter. Believe it or not, it is of little importance as you can consider me as a third alien party with the goal of not becoming a test subject, and for this, the RDA on Pandora needs to be stopped. Something you must want to do as well, Liam added. This gave birth to even more confusion within the two. Alien, huh? Yeah, I can see that, Trudy interjected, not believing what was given to her. But before she could speak again, Grace did. He is telling the truth. Trudy, Norm, I knew him for several months already and kept him hidden from the RDA. With Max, I lied to keep him a secret from you. And something so significant as him wouldn't slip past the rumors. Selfridge isn't the quietest individual, nor is Quaritch. Trust me. Trust him at least for this. We will need as much help as possible, she let out, both still not fully grasping the situation. Oh, you don't have to worry, Grace. I don't need anyone's approval for this. It was mere politeness. I will be honest. You can't win without my help, and I can't without you. Being cooperative is what we need. Be it with me, you, the people, and Iowa, Liam asserted, and it was the truth that no one wanted to hear. The mention of the All-Mother not going unnoticed by Norma, and even less by Grace. Both wanted to ask questions on this, but there was a time for this, and it wasn't now. What Jake, Norm, Trudy, and Grace did was a rash and illogical decision driven by emotion and a sense of right and wrong about why they betrayed the RDA. And by the extent of humanity, it felt right at the moment, but alas, there was no going back unless a bullet to the head was what they wanted. Though there was no regret, something Liam could see. Fear maybe, but not regret. Stupidity and courage walking hand in hand. Good thing he was here, because it would have simply been stupidity otherwise. How? Trudy asked. Hints of despair were detectable in her micro-expression. Her gaze locked onto the hologram, which earned a buzzing chuckle from it. I will not lie to you. The only individual I truly trust here is Grace Augustine. Though this trust can expand over to you, it is up to you to not prove me wrong. The RDA's greatest strength is their greatest weakness, technology, the source of their arrogance, and something to exploit. Liam said bluntly but trailed off at the end. Jake is exiting his link unit. I recommend you go see him, as I do not want to repeat myself several times. It would be a waste of time. Time we do not possess in excess, he added, his eyes dialing slightly to an almost inhuman degree. He wasn't going to stop himself from connecting via the smartwatch to the life shack. This man isn't human, okay? I see the alien part. I hope it just isn't some kind of bipedal lizard or some kind of robot we were working with. Trudy thought even with that in mind, she believed his words. There was no point in him lying, and Grace, someone she knew she could trust with her life, seemed to be perfectly okay with this man. That didn't mean the entire thing wasn't strange and suspicious at best, but frankly, he was absolutely correct they needed as much help as possible. This, however, made her aware this individual had access to the Life Shack system, the other possibility being ridiculous, and it was quite terrifying. And her guess would be correct. Even if it grossly underestimated how deep his grasp was, he didn't do half the job, and let it be, Liam hacked himself inside with extraordinary ease. It wasn't that there wasn't any defense. It's just that they might as well be non-existent since he simultaneously attacked 36 places from different angles, all the while staying hidden as he replaced the lines of codes for his own, literally copying and pasting the original code out of existence. And the Life Shack defense was more along the lines of correcting potential bugs and fixing errors that might happen if a piece of equipment is damaged. The door was wide open for him to do whatever pleased him. The fact Grace connected her smartwatch to one of the computers made it all but simpler. It was a contagious cancer after all. Back to the present. They did as he asked, each taking an exopack to not die by breathing Pandora's toxic air as they climbed down and entered the Life Shack to be met with Jake. The ex-Marine in his wheelchair had heavy eye bags under his eyes. His skin was pale. His frame was thin due to malnutrition and lack of care. And he looked sickly. His body has seen better days. His gaze, however, was the opposite. Even with obvious fatigue and sadness, it was hard and determined, and its focus was on the holographic screen that gave data about the lost child. I understand why this was kept hidden from me. I would let Quaritch know. And Max was aware of him as well. Jake mumbled, the vivid anger at Max's death still present. Hearing footsteps, he looked up, and a faint smile appeared. Where are we? I felt we moved and had short interruptions with my avatar. He asked no one in particular, and the answer he got was from the man he was just learning about. A being he truly wanted to meet in the flesh, which wasn't now, but that was to happen soon. The exact coordinates elude me, but I know you four are deeper in the Aram Elusing and relatively close to the Betrayal Ramunal, but you are in a relatively stable area, and the reason why I can communicate with you, Liam said, while at the same time his face appeared on a bigger holographic screen for all to see. It showed more of what was behind him. It hammered the fact it was of Nosik's origin, and at this moment someone else entered. It was a male Nosix, a teenager. Everyone in the Life Shack was surprised except for Grace and Jake, but what shocked all was that the teen had a prosthetic strapped on one of his hands and a functioning one. Knowing what likely happened was obvious. Knowing who made it more so, Liam did it, how they didn't know, but up till now this man had objects not found in the wild. The only options were he had them from the start or made them, and either choice entailed a lot. Grace was the one who knew more of Liam's prowess to play with such things to create as he pleased. It's truly him, Jake thought, eyes widening slightly as he recalled what Neytiri told him about the lost child. Admittedly, she didn't seem to be a fan of him, but she didn't really like anything human-looking or from human. Maybe accept him. So this was to be expected. She hated humans. They had taken so much and kept on taking her sister, the Tree of Voices, her ancestral home, even her father. But prejudiced as she was, that didn't stop her from being factual. And as such, he knew quite a bit about who this seemingly random Nosix was, and as such how the Olangi must see Liam. Something akin to a hero, if you were to take a guess. Whatever his origin may be, and whatever he truly was of little importance to Jake, because it is actions that told more than words. And anything really, they told more than any origin, culture, belief, skin color, sexuality, or even species. That much he could tell with his experience. This individual was not bad of heart, the opposite, and someone to respect if Neytiri's words were to be believed. As he did, the concept of lying was foreign to the Nosix, even to humans. They didn't even have a word for it. Though she also made it clear he was strong. To what extent and what it truly entailed that he didn't know. She tended to be cryptic, but he liked that about her. Liam, Father informed me that the warriors are ready to depart. The teen informed, his expression filled with worry, but he paused, realizing he might have done something wrong. What did he say? Trudy, the only one not speaking the native language, asked, and Norm immediately translated it for her. Am I interrupting something important? He asked, staying in place as his eyes switched from Liam to a black box with moving images of people, sky people he recognized. All were looking at him, all with interest and wonder, but the one from his savior was of mild annoyance. He evidently didn't know them, but by the current situation, he could guess, and he was proven right for both. Norm translated again for Trudy and was going to need to do so for the foreseeable future. Yes, but that isn't a problem, Maruk. Go tell Akwi that I will arrive soon. And before you ask, those are the ones that are to be our allies in the coming days and future. He said calmly in perfect Nasics, his face hardening and softening right after as he shooed the teenager away. This was unplanned, but, as some might have guessed or already knew, I'm in contact with a Nasics clan, the Olanji, and, as much I would like to say this will turn the odds in our favor, even with the Omaticea, and even counting the weapons I have. It wouldn't, Liam explained. These were unpleasant words, but true words. What weapons? Trudy was the first to ask, and this earned a nod from the hologram. Max's smartwatch is with an individual known as Wainfleet. And for the ones who want to know, it is the piece of shit known as Quaritch who killed him. This means I can spy on this individual who decided to take it as a vulgar trophy, he said, his voice getting colder at this. He very much was pissed off, but he didn't show it in his body language. He let them digest this news, both good and bad. Anger with sadness briefly flashed in each, some longer and more obvious than others. He continued, but that isn't truly a weapon now, is it? What I have is explosive attached to an arrow size for them, giving an equal yield to 500 grams, 1.1 lb, of hexahydro 135, trinitro 135, triazine when it will explode on impact. He answered matter-of-factly as an almost feral smirk formed, but at this, nearly no one understood until the individual who was the least expected to know explained. C4, and this much? This should be enough to blow up a Samson and render a Scorpion useless if hit right. Jake said aloud, a smile growing similar to Liam's own. He didn't understand what the scientific name made of babble nonsense truly meant, or what was the finer detail of, but he knew it was this old-school plastic explosive substance. He knew it pretty well. Why fix something that isn't broken? It works, it's cheap, quite powerful, stable, and safe to use, so it's used even in the 2150. New alloys and materials don't mean they are magically indestructible. It simply meant more explosives were needed. That is reassuring to hear, Norm said nervously. It was too much in too little time for him to process everything as compared to either Trudy or Jake. He was still trying to find a logical reason behind this, but the more time passed, the less it made sense. Grace on her side knew there was one more if it could be considered as such, but didn't deign to inform anyone of it as Liam didn't. She understood why, to a degree, and she decided to put her trust in him. It was thanks to Max it was usable as well. It could have not cost his life if either of them installed the virus earlier, but she couldn't go back in the past to fix her mistake. What happened happened. Now if you learn from it, that is different, and she intended to do so. We need more manpower, both aerial and terrestrial, for the war that is to come. And it's something I can't fix. Liam announced the reason why it would be enough, his gaze fixated on Jake's own, who didn't let go of the eye contact, understanding what was the problem as well. But I can, the ex-Marine said, his mind going to the legend told to him by Nadii, the one he read from the Nasics culture with his twin. The dream he had back on Earth about flying in the sky above a luscious primeval forest after he became a cripple and his stare with the last shadow, king and master of the sky. He knew what to do, what his destiny was, and what role was for him to play. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 49. The Prelude of War. Their horses and their Nasics rider, armed with the most proficient weapon they were in, and 5 explosive ceramic arrows could each be seen advancing at a moderate speed in the area separating the Great Plain from a massive rainforest under the Nasics name of Naring. At the head of the troop was Akwi, the Oloikton, and next to him was Liam walking at the same pace. On each of his shoulders was a tetrapterons. Another was flying around in a circle above. While for the fourth Tetrapteron, Oxydon, and his great Ostropede, Gladius was tasked to keep guard of his base, and by extension the one of the Olangi that will not fight. Oxydon was the one to have lost a game between its sister and brothers that was quite similar to drawing straw, but it was with eel-shaped fish instead. It was a game that already existed here. The Gnostics kid played it, and they must have copied it from them. It displeased both of his tames, but his great Ostropede was not fully grown, and will not make a great difference outside of being a literal meat shield, and a Tetrapteron to be here, to be aware of the sky. And with both of these could keep contact with what was ongoing without risk of interference. "You seem tense, blood brother," Acqui noted to Liam, who was even in full armor, except for the unfolded helmet. His slightly tense body could be seen. Thought that was more due to the Oloikton having been around the Lost Child for some time. It's, how to put it in words, preparing for war and going to it. It's different. It's obvious. But it is still something when it truly happens. Many will die in both camps, me and you not being exempt. To say I'm not scared would be deceiving myself and everyone. He answered truthfully, and as he did, his figure came back to normal, muscles and position relaxing as if correcting itself. That is true, and I feel no different than you. And this is equal for the warriors that volunteered. But fear is normal. Without it, we will not be able to fight, and we will not have the will to fight, Acqui said and nodded, surprised by the frankness. Something he greatly appreciated with Liam, his blunt honesty, and how he didn't downplay reality. Admitting your fear was something not many did, even if it's extremely valuable to do so. Acqui truly was grateful for what Liam did and kept on doing. He knew it was majorly to save his own skin, but the Gnostics was also aware Liam did this for more than simply survival. A few hours passed by with the troop advancing deep within the forest, following a seemingly random but determined and calculated path. No flora or fauna stopped them in their track. It has been unusually quiet even. If it was out of fear of the group or knowledge of what their purpose was or both, nobody was sure, but nobody complained. Liam's eyes were dilated and his left arm was up with Septem perched safely on his armored finger, one of its neural cues connected to his implant. A foggy image of a clearing showed. Smiling slightly, Liam announced for the group to move in that direction. He constantly used his Tetrapterons to scout and learn about his surroundings. Even if the Gnostics knew the place and the method to travel through it safely to attain their final destination, having another angle such as a bird's view from the sky never hurt. That is truly an ingenious way of using such critters. A relatively old-looking Gnostics with a long bow attached to his shoulder said to no one in particular. It is sharing memory in such a way. It shows how much we can learn. Another one added, this one was female and looked slightly younger. Their words did not go unheard by Liam, who simply ignored the two elders. Those were the ones who were the less amiable with his presence. Nothing particularly remarkable in and of itself, but seeing how they came to become less stuck up, so to say, was always a plus. It was getting dark, and as such the most definitive outward aspect of the native biology made itself clear, bioluminescence in all of its color, shades, brightness, and patterns. It's breathtakingly beautiful, Liam thought. Gazing upon the large area, they decided to set camp. A pond with colorful plants and fish was to the side, while plants of all shapes sprouted from the ground could be seen, many of which he recognized thanks to Grace and the Gnostics. Plants that for the most part weren't truly plants, outside of being alien, making them entirely separate and unrelated beings from the phylogenetic tree of Earth. Those were a homogeneous mix between the equivalent of Pandora animal, pure plant, and fungus with some more. A fact that made them quite interesting to work with, be it for cooking or crafting. Anyway, moving within the night was dangerous, but that wasn't why the group stopped there. Dire horses did not possess infinite endurance. The same was for the Gnostics and himself as well. Though the fact he had way more endurance than their steeds shocked the Olangi's warriors to their core, humans, if in good shape, could outspeed nearly all of the other animals with sheer endurance in the long run, and he was no exception. He was just this, but pushed to the extreme. Placing his backpack on a tree branch, Liam looked at it for some time. His inventory was extremely important, and he was quite sure many had suspected he had power, this being one of them. Marali in particular, even if she didn't understand what it was. Gnostics weren't dull, lacking in many basic aspects such as math due to their upbringing certainly, but the vast majority weren't stupid, and him being new made that his every move and words were studied, so to say. And he didn't consider himself a good actor or a good liar for that matter. Lying always comes back to you in one way or another unless extreme means were used. This was why he was blunt and unbending on things he didn't want to speak about outside of his simple hate of lies. Tact wasn't his forte. I don't truly need to keep this hidden. Either way, people who don't know me will see me as a potential lab rat or a freak. And I simply can't cripple myself in such a way for eternity when I'm with others. Liam reflected upon the possible outcome of doing so. Maybe it wasn't the best of times to do this, but they really weren't for such things. He was going to use it soon, be forced to, as he won't increase his chance of dying for this. It was born out of both rational and irrational paranoia, the reason he kept hidden in the first place. And he kept on doing it. And so he held the palm of his left hand up and a large piece of treated leather with black nylon, a reinforced hammock. The entire place quieted down in shock, attracting the attention of others who didn't understand the sudden shift. Acqui, not far from him, was preparing his tent, and had seen it all, his eyes switching from widened in disbelief at the supernatural sight to understanding as a smile formed. So that was what Marali spoke about. There are more and more. He has many secrets. We are truly blessed by Iwa to have such a being with us. The Oloikton thought. He didn't try to comprehend how this was possible, as he perfectly knew he simply couldn't. Liam ignored them as if it was normal what he just did, because he put what he took out on his shoulder and placed his left hand on his backpack, and reality shifted, light bent, and in but 3 seconds the bag vanished from existence, leaving nothing behind. This time all saw it, but the way Liam did it stopped anyone from daring to ask questions. Not many dared to even do so with his status within the clan. And aside from this, it was already well accepted within each of the Na-6 presents that the lost child could do the impossible. An articulated metallic arm popped from his left shoulder. It held the hammock high as Liam took out 2 metallic hooks and securely placed his sleeping place high up between 2 trees, and he jumped down, leaving deep footprints. "Tonight I cook," he said loudly, a large smile appearing on his face. What marvelous and impossible actions he just did become, but a thing of the past, as everyone cheered at the news. The next day within the con mod, the commanding room of Hell's Gate, graphs and simulations were calculated from the data taken from artificial satellites orbiting Pandora. "What are they doing?" Quaritch mumbled, gazing curiously upon the holographic screen of the operations center, the interface of a supercomputer in the form of an isle. A smirk etched itself upon his weathered-down feature as an amusing realization dawned upon him. Most of the clans and tribes were known. Same was for the areas they lived in. When one suddenly moved after their ancestral home was destroyed, it was coherent. When another completely unrelated to the former moved in the same direction and time frame, it is suspicious, but can be considered a coincidence. However, when this was repeated 13 times, something was evidently going on. Building an army of giant smurfs. Now are we Jake and Grace? He chuckled at that self-asked rhetorical query. He didn't believe for 1 second that the natives were mentally capable enough to do such a task. And in that instance, it was true. He didn't know how they did, but they were resourceful about doing so. Then he looked at the various Na-6 groups' destinations, ordering the computer to exactly predict where they more likely were going. It made his smile grow. They were moving toward another of their sacred trees within those floating mountains. "At least I won't have to look at every nook and cranny to find them." His mumble trailed off as he reached another conclusion. "And it seems they still have the will to fight in them after what happened, and how underpowered they are. Admirable. But that means I wasn't clear enough the last 2 times." A third harsher and bloodier lesson seemed in order. Orders were then immediately given by him to gather within the meeting, to people he knew would want to participate in. As much as he didn't take the Na-6, Jake, and his group of plant nerds as a threat capable of defeating them, they still were a threat, and all the manpower available needed to be used. This little army was made for one reason, one he acknowledged even if he extensively laughed at. It was for war, and as such it needed to be taken care of as soon as possible. He didn't want to have to clean the front of his base from thousands of dead Na-6 and their beasts after they were shot down by the automatic turrets, not forgetting that it will stink of death and rotting flesh for several months. 3 hours after those orders, and a speech with his men and women on the way, they were going to break the Geneva Conventions and several less important solar unity laws. The colonel was down in the vehicles bay. His analytical gaze studied the work of the ones who were loyal to him as he encouraged them. Those were the SEC ops, but also of a no small portion of the civilians, such as the miners. Both had an inclination ranging from dislike to deep hate for Gnostics. In the first place, if you decide to come here to this hell, hole no better than Earth in many aspects, you are less than stable. It was essentially a one-way ticket. It ranged from war vet, convicted individuals to desperate individuals with a rare father and mother who had come here to feed their family back on Earth. It was fairly simple to get the mining part of the RDA under his fold. It was already the case before, but now it was more concrete and official thanks to what the Gnostics clans were doing. And it went with many noticing it. Parker Selfridge looked around his face, a mix between visceral rage and deeply set horror at what was unfolding before his very eyes. He needed to stop this madness. No, no, no. And oh, he suddenly exclaimed, hitting with both hands charges of explosives that were being dragged towards the C-21 Dragon assault ship. I wouldn't do that, sir. A miner, one of the four dragging it toward the assault ship, said in visible worry and confusion. The blasting compound goes back to the mine. What's your name? He yelled and pointed his finger at the same confused man in fury. Dogadash, you're fired. Selfridge didn't let him finish before he stormed toward the source of it all. This thing is completely out of control. Listen to me. I'm not authorizing you to turn my mine workers into a freaking militia. He yelled at Quaritch, still pointing his finger in frustration. Most of his words went ignored as the colonel was instructing a soldier where a portion of AMP should be boarded, with the letters AMP standing for Amplified Mobility Platform. It's a power suit. I declared threat condition red. That put all on-world assets under my command, Quaritch said matter-of-factly as he walked away. Oh, you think you can pull this palace coup on me? I can have your ass with one phone call. Selfridge screamed arrogantly as he walked in front of the colonel, his fingers still pointed, not fully understanding the full implication of a sudden change in hierarchy, which went instantly rectified by Quaritch, who grabbed the thin businessman with both hands by the side of his jaws and neck lifting slightly off the ground, and he hissed in a way similar to a Gnostic's. You're a long way from Earth, he said, those simple words filled with untold threats. His cold eyes, with a hint of madness, staring straight into Selfridge's terrified ones as he let go of his hold and ordered for the ex-administrator to be put in a cell. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165. 50. Meeting in the flesh. Within the Hallelujah Mountains, on a slightly elevated area where the magnetic vortices were weaker than usual. This is insane, Norm Spellman said, fiddling with the M60 machine gun in his currently larger and bluer hands. No, this is just a gun. A big gun with enough power to blow a hole the size of a tree trunk in a man's chest, I can give you that, but still a gun, Trudy said with a faint smile as she helped the scientist currently piloting his avatar on how to use a machine gun correctly. A machine gun that was one of her Samson, the turrets on each of the doors be precise. This was a big weapon no humans could wield easily or wield at all. The weapon was almost longer than she was tall, and certainly quite a bit heavier too. Their moment was, however, suddenly interrupted by a blue and purple Tetrapteron who landed right onto the gun's barrel, both freezing at this, not knowing what to do. It studied them with its 4 eyes in a way only a self-aware being could, its gaze in particular focused on the 5 digits on each of Norm's hands. Confusion could almost be discerned as it tilted its head. This Gnostic's had too many fingers. The Tetrapteron realized it must be one of the individuals father spoke about. Trudy intrusive thought won over her more logical and rational sides, and she extended her hand toward the alien to pet it. And the bird instantly screeched in something akin to disgust as it lifted its left talon in aggression, a gauntlet of titanium that until now unnoticed was on it. The bird snapped the metal claws together in a threatening manner, and sparks of electricity were emitted from it, causing both to jump back in fright, letting the gun fall on the grass. Stop, Septin. Those are our allies. I would like it if you do not traumatize them. A bass voice with a metallic undertone resonated, and from the tall grass, a man in full black armor walked out. He lifted his left hand, and the Tetrapteron that threatened them earlier landed onto the extended fingers. This snapped the two to the present, Norm picking up the machine gun in a burst of panic while Trudy realized who this was with a mix of relief and dread. The safety is on. It can't shoot, Dr. Norm Spellman, Liam said amusedly as his helmet unfolded, showing the slight smirk he wore on his face, his silver eyes instinctively studying both body language. It felt weird in a way. It had been some time since he saw humans in the flesh. Either way, it wasn't surprising. Norm, to put it mildly, was a nerd, and one in biology. Not that Liam himself was much different in various points from this, but he just hoped this mistake wouldn't be repeated for what is to come the next day on the battlefield. Then there was a long, drawn-out silence as Norm calmed himself down, embarrassed by what was told and mildly horrified at what he was going to do in such a state. It was broken by the woman next to him. "So you are Liam Cram? You're pretty tall, all right," she said, stopping the need to back away while her body tenses up ready to flee, as if in some kind of primitive flight or flight instinct in her DNA as he approaches them. He towered well over her measly 1 meter and 65 centimeters, 5 feet 4, of height. She could estimate he was easily around 2 meters, 6 feet 56, if not slightly more. And Norm's avatar, while taller, was a matchstick in comparison to the mountain of muscles and armor in front of them. Liam's face was the most intimidating factor, adding to the confidence and palpable certainty of his every movement as if calculated. Then there was also this feeling around him that made them both comfortable and uneasy. There was something off about him, but they couldn't pinpoint where, why, and what it was. "The one and only," Liam answered, his smile receding slightly but still present. "I suppose I should inform Grace and Jake of my presence, and that of the Volangi that came here to fight." At those words, his eyes narrowed to pinprick, but as soon as it happened, they came back to normal. Trudy was immensely creeped out by this split-second change. This being was so deep in the uncanny valley that it explained pretty much everything. And what is that glowing piece of metal on his left arm? Is it part of his armor, or? She wondered, as the said object of her interest glowed brighter. It was similar to the symbol that she saw on Grace's smartwatch and every device's holographic screen in the Life Shack. It was his symbol or one of significance for him. As for Norm, he was preoccupied with different and arguably way less important aspects as he began to ask Liam questions such as, "How can you breathe? How did you manage to tame the native wildlife, even if they are extensively aggressive? How? I'm built differently on a fundamental level. That's all I will say, and most of the questions have already been answered in the past. This isn't the time for unimportant questions, too. We are in a war." Liam's voice was severe, frighteningly cold, even more than he intended. He killed the enthusiasm of the scientist to bring reality back to the table. This was very effective. Trudy began sweating cold sweats and tensing up while the avatar's ears folded backward as he looked to the ground in shame. Liam didn't mean to scare them, but the reality was scarier and colder. He wasn't exactly faring better either. He wasn't the most peaceful or loving individual by a long shot, but that was a war he will have to fight with them on his side with all of its unpleasant implications. His head then turned at regular speed for him, but for Avatar and human was a snap of the neck, and it was to be met with the familiar auburn-haired scientist fumbling out of the metal block that is the Life Shack, an exopack on her exhausted face. "Greeting, Grace. I would have loved for this first true meeting to be in better circumstances, but beggar can't be chooser," the bear of a man said in a friendly tone toward the rapidly approaching xenobotanist. "Right, you are a pleasure to meet you as well, Liam. If you want to talk to Jake, the leader of our little group of traders, it will be impossible for the moment as he is piloting his avatar. He is creating an alliance with the surrounding Nosix clan, but that you must know already," Grace said with a tone filled with relief, and she extended her right hand for a handshake, which Liam took, forcing Septem to fly up a random tree's branch while not forgetting to make its unhappiness known. Liam's left gauntlet up to his wrist, then unfolded itself smoothly, showing the great engineering of his armor, and it revealed a regular, if calloused hand of the size and shape one would expect of someone his build. But what was the most noticeable was the strange bit of metal with an orange hologram millimeter above was not part of the armor, but an integral part of his arm. And no one needed to ask, as he did it himself. Yes, it is in numerous ways what you might think it is. Consider it as if it were an organ, a simple body part, as much as a hand is a part of your body. "I even have a sense of touch on it, if muted," he simply said, not giving any true explanation and giving a shake to the outstretched hand of the confused scientist. though he was extremely careful with how much strength he used, something easy as he could control his strength surprisingly well. If it wasn't the case, he would be a garbage craftsman and likely would have died 10 times over. As for the why, for him, most of the Gnostic's bones, the ones on the digits and hands in particular, felt little different than twigs for a human. So the bones of a middle-aged human woman that are weakened by a lower gravity were no different to him than dry grass for a regular human, if not weaker. It weirded Liam out by not a small amount, even if he knew. It truly put into perspective how different he was, as Gnostics were different from baseline humans, and as such not a good point of comparison to gauge his own strength. And Grace felt this striking difference in strength too. How could she not? Though she knew he would be strong, but not this strong. However, she felt no fear. The opposite, in fact. He was intimidating, extremely so. That was a fact, but he wasn't a psychotic, genocidal madman like Quaritch, and as such there was little to reason of fearing him unless you gave him reasons to want to hurt you, in which case. Yes, fear and terror are on the menu aplenty. And it brought her back to reality from his earlier words about the pieces of lozenge-shaped piece metal fused with his skin. He was strong, insanely so. If a comparison could be made, it was as if she was being held carefully by a hydraulic press on the point of being turned on. Holy shit. Does your adrenal gland naturally produce super steroids in excess for you to be this fucking strong? She exclaimed, shaking her hand off while he simply shrugged, and his gauntlet put itself back as if by magic, each piece perfectly putting themselves back together in an almost hypnotizingly satisfying manner. A monster in both body and mind. Grace thought, the monster part not being derogatory in any way, shape, or form. That I do not know, neither for the steroid, nor what gland are you speaking of. And that is not the time for pleasantries, Liam said with a smile appearing for a brief instant before it disappeared. The atmosphere became heavier. But as Liam opened his mouth to continue, his eyes suddenly narrowed as he looked up to a fiery red that in the sky that was rapidly approaching, attracting the attention of everyone present toward what causes him to do this. The dot was now close enough to determine that it was a giant flying creature approaching them at a dangerous speed. Liam realized what this was and ordered his 3 Tetrapterons to calm down and not bomb the apex predator of the sky with their explosive charges on their miniature satchel. They were fearless, extremely small, fast, agile, and smart, one rushing and placing an explosive charge on the skin of the flying giant's wing, and the beast will plummet straight from the sky to the ground and die on it, its internal organs crushed and punctures by the bones in its ribcage. It was a Toruk, or in English, a great Leonopteryx, and its rider was Jake, or otherwise known as the Toruk Macto. A simple deduction from the last call with Grace, the information from the RDA he has access to, and basic common sense. Also what he said to the man in question. The Toruk's massive wingspan and size created a large shadow by blocking the brightest of the 2 suns from the sky. It flew around the life shack for a few seconds before landing right in front of Liam, and an avatar jumped down. Jake gazed at the silver-eyed individual that only gazed back. He guessed it could, but only one individual, the lost child Liam Cram. The avatar's face was heavy as he walked with large strides toward Liam and extended his left hand for a handshake. It was answered. Jake's current hand, while bigger than the armored right hand of Liam, was weaker in power by a long shot, and this caused his eyes to widen briefly. The words of Neytiri that entailed that the lost child was strong were a gross understatement. He can crush my hand all right, Jake thought as he saw the head of great Leonopteryx behind him survey everyone with scrutiny, but Liam in particular, and it caused unrest within everyone but the silver-eyed man in question, who merely gazed back with no modicum of fear. Something was hanging around him, a presence with a vague familiarity to something felt when he was at the Tree of Voices. It was strange to describe, but it felt like it was hugging him. Jake could feel this, and so did his Toruk. But that was of little importance right now. Excellent, I won't have to repeat what I have to say. Quaritch has completely taken control of the RDA resources on Pandora. He has created a militia of around 700 strong composed of the SEC Ops and a large portion of the civil workforce to destroy the Tree of Soul we are close to and us. His force that is going to be used are 1 Dragon assault ship, 27 Scorpion gunship, 45 Samsung, and over 150 amp suits, Liam revealed in a matter-of-fact way and with an almost flat tone, but his great discontentment was clear and for all to see. This news was hard, shocking, and horrifying, but not unexpected. It hit hard, however, when Jake asked with a single word, his facial expression hardening as he balled his fists in anger. Before dawn, they will arrive. This happened this morning and with my location at the time. It's the reason I came to learn about it only recently, too recently. Quaritch will arrive here before dawn. He saw through the satellites what we might be doing and used this to start a coup, and he succeeded, Liam explained further. Dread and horror washed over them at this news of impending doom, but Liam was far from being finished. And if the monster of a man seemed calm, confident even then, there must be good reasons. He is going to make a beeline with his entire force straight through the Hallelujah Mountains to destroy the Tree of Souls we are close to and take us with it. We are lucky the bulldozers are too slow to arrive here and too heavy to be transported by aerial means, he added, not needing to explain in great detail what it entailed. Terrain, surprise, and numerical advantages were with them. The lack of knowledge about Liam's existence and what he brought only aiding them. But still, the RDA has the technological and firepower advantage to a ridiculous degree. A single Scoption gunship can kill an entire unprepared clan to the very last of its members if it has enough bullets or explosives. Arrow as powerful as the one shot by Na-6 simply doesn't go through the military-grade reinforced glass of such an aircraft. The only reinforced glass that was weak enough was the one of the AMP suits, and that needed several ones at the right places. Liam, are you certain? Grace asked, knowing full well the answer was going to be affirmative. Liam didn't lie nor was deceitful. He was blatantly blunt. Yes, I am, and I wish I wasn't, and the answer fell. We need to act fast. The warriors I have come with, the Olangi, are already informing the Omaticea and other clans Jake has made come, but we need to inform everyone and form a battle plan. And something I didn't mention, but the All-Mother had enough of staying neutral, he said, the last few words confusing all but Jake, whose eyes widened and a reassured smile appeared on his face. My Patreon if you want to give me money and have chapters 1/2 finished in advance. Patreon.com/user U equals 60424165.